Thanks, time. So. All right, welcome to tonight's Selectmen's meeting for March 14th, 2016. Mr. Clerk, would you do the honors and lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Tonight, 6:30, organized pledge and read mail. And wait for Mr. DeCoste. Oh, there he is. That would be at 6:32. He's walking right on time. 6:35, 2017 budget planning. 2017 operating budgets with finance. We have a joint committee meetings with finance committee, school committee. Financial management policy. B is financial management policy amendments. C is the free cash. D is staffing levels, police, town clerk, and veterans. 7:15, May 2nd, 2016 annual and special town meeting, complete insertion of articles. And 7:45, we're going to go into executive session to deliberate value of land, Cooper Farm, 180 Great Road. Mr. Bergman, mail. Mr. Chairman, just a couple of items. First, we last Monday night, you may recall, we applied for a grant under the Complete Streets program, and on Friday we got the grant. So it's took so long. I know. $43,222, which we can use to develop our prioritization plan. And that we have a deadline of August 1st to get that work done, and then we can apply for up to $400,000 for construction funding. So they're in a rush. We were, I think, one of the first communities to get our Complete Streets policy certified by the state, and they're in a rush to spend the money, and we're in a rush to spend it. So works out well. And I just put in another grant award notice that we got a copy of today, and this is a $2,000 capacity building grant from the CHNA 15 group, which is based in Concord. This is for our Council on Aging, Department of Elder and Human Services, so congratulations to Pamela Campbell for putting together that successful application. One other comment about Town of Littleton getting more money is I got a message from Representative Arserio last Thursday or Friday. They were here Monday to update us on the legislation activities for fiscal year 17. We asked about the $100,000 for the playground. He informed me within the next 3 weeks. They contacted the governor's office. Governor's office said that we should be receiving the check within the next 3 weeks for the program, so appreciate that. All right, moving on to our first agenda item is fiscal year 2017 operating budget, joint meeting with the Finance Committee and School Committee. Everybody's here, everybody's in session, we're all good to go. Bonnie, why don't you start us off, walk us through, and if we're going to jump into schools first, and then we're going to wrap everything else up. Any questions, if you hear anything that you want to talk about, by all means, just let us know and we'll listen.
Right.
Go ahead.
So I would probably just jump to page 3 of the memo that I had provided. I think that's the easiest one. We did receive a revised school request with an increase of $1,132,929, an appropriation increase for town meeting. This isn't a total budget increase, this is just the town meeting appropriation. The school budget is made up of other funds outside of the town meeting appropriation. We did receive some verification, or some documentation justifying the increase, and we were able to validate many of the requests. Some of them we could not, so I'll just walk you through what we were able to validate and support and what we weren't.
Members, you guys have copies of all this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes, we do.
Finance? Okay, just make sure. Very good.
The first one is for salary increases of $555,000. This is the step and lane changes and cost of living adjustments that are due under the bargaining agreements and for other employees also. That was validated within our payroll system, so that is fine. The water bill increase, we know that the water rates did go up quite a bit this past year, so that is a one that we could also validate. The 2 additional full-time equivalent staffing positions for Russell Street and the high school at $120,000. That's for the 2 positions, so that was also able to be validated. Curriculum materials and resources requested at $100,000. We can say that there's $100,000 in requests. I don't have data to see if there's anything falling off, if there's curriculum that is being discontinued, but I can validate that there's $100,000 being requested in additional curriculum needs. Case transportation, there is an increase being assessed in the amount of $37,000. It's a percentage increase that is being assessed. I don't know if the demographics are changing at this point for the students. I don't know if there are some students that are aging out that were on this transportation, but I can validate that the increase based on the percentage is $37,000. Substitute costs. The request was $75,000. We were able to validate about $6,500 in increases. The substitute costs have been paid for at least the past 2 fiscal years within the operating budget between several different accounts. So it's not an increase, it's looking to support that budget by way of town meeting appropriation instead of other funds that are being used. That would be the same thing for the occupational therapy. These $75,000 in costs have been incurred for the last 2 fiscal years in other line items. And special ed tuition, out-of-district tuition, there's a request for $165,000. The net special ed tuition actually decreased by $133,000, and I'll walk through that. So the variance would be just about $300,000 on that one. So we were able to validate about $700,000 in increases, per se, that the school department will need to pay in the fiscal 17 budget. So it's about a $435,000 difference. I'll walk through just the special ed calculation. The total out-of-district tuition for fiscal 16 was stated at $2.7 million, with $700,000 coming in from, that came in last year for circuit breaker funds. So the net budget was just over $2 million, and that's incurred in this fiscal year's operating budget. For next year, the out-of-district tuition was stated at $2.7 million, a little bit higher, $2.77. However, the circuit breaker funds coming in are about $193,000 more. So the net is $1.8 million, or down by $133,000, based on the tuition payments that we received. And I think that's what I have for a summary for the school department, if you will.
Sure. You guys want to mention, have any validation questions or finance committee?
I'd like to hear from the school department.
Sure.
Okay. So relative to the variance that's been calculated, in terms of the substitute cost and the occupational therapy, Bonnie hit it exactly right. It's money that we have been spending, and we're not looking to spend any more, but we do feel significant pressure to move the funding away from the school choice funds, which has primarily been where we've been paying the overages because we've under budgeted those, out of that into the operational budget, into the, the appropriated budget, so that we have the flexibility to use school choice for what we typically use it for, which is unexpected costs. These are expected. When they are expected, we prefer to have them supported by the appropriated budget. So those amounts are necessary, and that's why they're put in as increases, even though they don't actually change in the overall spending. We do want to fund them appropriately, and we feel very strongly that needs to be done through the appropriation. Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit about what we just walked through in terms of the out-of-district costs?
Oh, sure. If you refer to Bonnie's explanation in regard to out-of-district costs, what is missing is the appropriated amount that we've designated. So in FY16, our appropriated designation was $1.7 million, which leaves us with a $293,000 deficit that we have to make up this year out of revolving funds. If we assume that that appropriated budget stayed the same for FY17 at $1.7 million, If you subtract 1.8 million from 1.7 million, you result in an increase of $165,000. So I guess that's where it doesn't make sense at this point in time in terms of a decrease in funding. Money is within our appropriated budget, unless there's something that we're unaware of in terms of increased funding somewhere. The numbers don't jive with us.
The school out-of-district tuition was based on this number last year, so the total spending plan last year included this 2.7 million, and then incorporated 700,000 coming out of circuit breaker funds, and another 372,000 in planned use of school choice funds. So this 2.7 hasn't changed from the budget planning that happened in fiscal 15 for 16.
Right, but our actual spending has.
It's still the 2.7 million.
Right, I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm disagreeing with is the appropriated amount of 1.7 that we have in our budget. If you
Right.
subtract the 2 million from there, it results in a deficit of 293,000 for the FY16 year.
Correct, but the spending plan for fiscal 16 always incorporated this 2.7 million, and the school sets their appropriation levels at whatever the school wants to set them at. But you always planned on spending this 2.7 million, so it was coming from somewhere. It's not a new expense.
Right.
And I would counter that, we could set the appropriation level at a more reflective amount that is really being incurred, because this number was known. This isn't a new number.
Which is indicative of an increased cost.
But it was 2.7 million in the planning last year for
I
fiscal
agree.
16.
I'm not disputing that.
So the budget was set at that, so
Right, what I'm disputing is there's no awareness or indication of what our appropriated amount was to support that total cost.
because the appropriated amount could be set at 0, it could be set at 2 million, it could be, your total spending plan included this amount. So between all of the accounts, it included the 2.7 million. The appropriated amount can be manipulated for any amount. And as
I
our
don't like
other,
the word manipulation, but
maybe that's the
the
wrong.
bottom line is this year in special education, we're facing a $293,000 deficit that we have to make up. Any way you want to put that, that's the reality of FY16.
So do you have actual cost numbers? I mean,
The state has provided that information, yes.
That 2.7 million is a valid number, and that was the number that was planned for last fiscal year for fiscal 16. So
Okay,
that
but-
was incorporated into the school budget for this
so
fiscal.
Kelly, I guess I'm confused where where that $135,000 delta
Okay.
or
And my
shortfall.
apologies, we don't have a slide made up. I'm trying to think of the easiest way to explain this. In our appropriated budget, we allocate a certain amount of money to cover special education costs. In FY16, that was 1.7 million. So we have the total cost in FY16 of 2.7 million. We subtract the FY15 circuit breaker of 700,000. But if we look at what was approved last year for our budget, our appropriated budget, we'd have to subtract the 1.7 million from the 2 million. And when you do that, you end up with a deficit of $295,000. I don't know if that's making sense yet.
No. So when you say appropriated, and who's doing the appropriation here?
That's good, that's a good question. That's the appropriated budget that was approved by the town. meeting.
2.7,
The 1.7
the 1.7.
was approved at the town meeting.
No, the town meeting approves one line item, and then I get a breakout from the school department, how they want to allocate it into
Okay.
the different line items.
Okay.
So I just need to make sure that the total adds up to the 17,250,000 that they were appropriated at town meeting. But their budget planning included the use of this 2.7 million with that 17 million plus their other funds.
Yep.
This was a known number. So how they broke it out should support the 2.7 in spending.
And what you're saying, it's 3 point?
No, what I'm saying is, out of the approved budget, appropriated budget last year,
Yeah.
we had allocated $1.7 million to offset those costs. offset the cost of the 2.7 million.
Okay, so you're decreasing your cost by 1.7, which brings it
Right.
down to actual spending of 1.01356.
Well, no, if you take 2.7 million, subtract 700,000 from circuit breaker, subtract 1.7 million from the appropriated budget, you end up with a deficit of $295,000.
That we paid for.
Can I show you
accounts.
this, my paper, maybe that will help?
Sure.
For our school choice.
It's difficult when you're throwing numbers out.
Yeah.
I couldn't follow if I was asleep. So, here's the total spending,
Total spend.
and we agree with that.
Yep,
This is circuit breaker,
gotcha.
so we end up with the 2 million. But within the appropriated budget, we allocated 1.7 million. That was the approved budget of FY16.
Gotcha. So I guess my question is, the 2,713,567 is part of the 17 million, which is a specific line item?
No.
No?
The 2.7
Steve,
million was
go ahead.
incorporated in the total spending plan for fiscal 16.
Okay.
It was known then, it hasn't changed
Okay.
substantially at all. So in the spending plan last year, the school said, we need 17,250 plus the 700 from circuit breaker, plus another 372,000 in school choice funds. And
Yeah.
that was, aside from the grants and everything else.
Yeah.
That was their spending plan. So this 2.7 million had to be incorporated in part of that. How they set the line items, the 1.7 that's in the budget, is their discretion. But the spending plan included this 2.7, so they incorporated the difference somewhere else. In their grants, other revolving funds, somewhere else. But it was known and it was incorporated into the spending plan.
Go ahead, yeah.
Is the objective then, that, I'm gonna use round numbers, $300,000, that's the delta right now, is you've paid for that with the expense this year out of other funds, and you want it incorporated in the.
Correct.
The town.
Similar
appropriations.
to, and really that is, and we can clear up the numbers after the fact, and we will, to make it, more palatable, easier to digest, and we can get the information out beyond this immediate audience. But really, you've hit the nail on the head. And this is the issue, is that we, right now, based on the analysis we've done, are asking for a $1.1 million increase in the appropriation in order to do two things. One is to meet increased expenses, our salaries are up, our spending is up, other things are up, okay? But also to alleviate the pressure of the spending on non-appropriated funds, because if we don't alleviate that pressure, we're going to run out.
You're trying to
So-
preserve circuit breaker, I presume?
Not circuit breaker, because that gets spent year by year, but it's really school choice is the last discretionary amount that we have left, that we have all agreed in the past, we wanted to keep a balance in, so that when actual spending didn't necessarily meet the budgeted spending plan, we could meet it without having to go to special town meetings or other exercises, and we've successfully done that for many years. But we're starting to worry that we're not going to be able to. And what really we're worried about is that when we are able to meet those unexpected expenditures, whether it's unexpected or last year, we made a deliberate determination that we couldn't get all the way there through the appropriation. And rather than cut staff or do without, we relied more on the services, which is fine to an extent. But then when we have a more unexpected spending, that has to get met back in the appropriation at some point. Right now, we feel like this is the point to do it. This is the effort we're making, is to alleviate that pressure on those other accounts and get the appropriation to accurately reflect what the increases are.
Well, I guess, a frustration that I've had, and I think the finance committee, is getting all that information. So we can see all those different accounts and how it's built into your spending plan. And I guess it's, when we sit down and we talk about the appropriation from the town, and you're asking for an increase based on, the 700,000 that you can validate, an additional 435,000, I believe it is, 432, above and beyond.
But it's not a question of validation, because Bonnie was clear and said that She understands that we are spending that money. So the issue is not that we're spending it, the issue is how should we pay for it? What account should we
I
draw
get it,
down
but
on?
we don't see that. I mean,
But
all we,
we've shown it, Jim.
well,
We've talked about
we have,
at
Mike,
length.
we have talked about it.
We've talked about at length that remember when we went through the budget exercise last year, when we all agreed that we couldn't get to where we wanted to be, we went back and strategized and in public meeting voted a budget that said, we will spend this much of that, it will be this much appropriation, this much circuit breaker, and this much school choice. It was clearly delineated.
It would be nice to
demarcated.
have a presentation.
You have it now, it's right
where-
there, it's
where-
all broken out.
Where we could see not only, your school choice funds, what is being spent
It's
out
all
of
in there,
there this
Jim.
year.
You got it on Friday. It's
All right.
all in there. It's broken out. All the grants, all the revolving funds, broken out by cost center.
Right.
One of the challenges we're having, if we look at occupational therapy costs, for
Yep.
example, we've been very successful in bringing students back into our district that were placed out of our district, but with that comes expenses in terms of providing necessary services to them. Those costs are increasing, and we're not seeing a decrease in our out-of-district placement costs because the students that we're placing out of district now cost more money because they have more needs. So we're not reaping any immediate benefit. With the caveat, if we weren't bringing students back in, our out-of-district costs would be a lot higher than they are. So we've been trying to take this money out of any savings that we incur during the year, and don't think we have a lot of savings. Most of our budget is salaries, as everybody in this room understands. So the savings that are occurred are basically energy costs. If we have a mild year, we make up on those costs, and we can use that to help fund the OT costs. That in school choice. So, and if we look at the substitute costs, it's the same thing. We have not been able to budget our substitute total amount within our appropriated budget. So we've been taking that money out of school choice. We've been taking it out of any other pockets that become available to us during the year. Our costs are increasing in our substitute line. It's not because our teachers are becoming ill. We have a younger staff who's taking maternity leave. Our professional development costs are covered within those lines as well. So we have more access for professional development. We have more teachers on maternity leave. Those costs naturally are escalating. So we're doing what we can to pull those costs out of a variety of accounts, but that's not a good way of budgeting. If it's a fixed cost that's going to occur every year, you know as well as I do, if you budget a private company like that, you're going to end up in a corner. You have to realize those costs as costs that are going to occur from year to year.
The efficacy of the numbers are not a debate. At least I don't think
Well,
so.
I still have, I want to go back to your comment of, I'll let you go, to say, they're all here, Jimmy, they're all here. We got them on Friday. That's a problem, we got them on Friday. You live with these numbers all year. We don't.
Jimmy, the
And
numbers,
to
the
try and
numbers,
understand, to try and
the numbers
understand, all I'm
have been
saying
out
is,
there.
we need to work a little bit better together.
we show all of our spending multiple times every year. Now, we don't necessarily show them in one slick snapshot that breaks it out cost center by cost center, like the one I supplied on Friday. But it's shown. The information is out there. We talk about it all the time at school committee. So anybody that wants to know how much we spend out of our revolving accounts and our grants, 4 times a year, you go to school committee, it's in the packet, there it is in black and white. So it's there, it's disseminated. Could it be disseminated in a more clear manner? We're working with it and we got it, and it's there. But to say that we've never shown it is erroneous. It's shown all the time.
Okay,
Bonnie,
I'm just looking to
correct me.
understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do.
Correct me, Bonnie, if I'm wrong, but you know we've spent more money. We've just taken it out of other accounts. So it's not really a verification, it's a spending plan. You know we spent that $75,000 in OT services.
Absolutely.
You know we spent
And
that
I-
money in
Exactly.
subcosts.
And I validated
Right.
that.
But-
But in your total budget, I guess my point is, in the total budget, the appropriated budget, the 17,250, yes, you're over on substitute costs and occupational therapy. You're under on other line items. And it's the same with all the other departments, too. It's not unique. The highway has the same issue, my department has the same issue. We're under on some, we're over on others, and we adapt.
Correct.
So you're only, in this, presenting the overages. we're not looking at the total picture. And I agree, these have been these have been consistent the last, at least 2 years that I went back.
Actually, 4 years, but.
I went back too, and I could validate that. So I support your statement on that. It's just,
Jim, the efficacy of the numbers do not seem to be in debate. Is that correct, Bonnie?
nope.
Okay.
The ones that were
It's
say here.
the ones that are here.
The ones that are here.
The thing is, so the 300,000, just to stick with sped, so we do one thing at a time and not go down too many rabbit holes at one time. And that is, it's the sourcing of the money. Whether it should be, and that's the discussion item, whether it should be an appropriated item or it should come out of a revolving fund. I believe that's the crux of the discussion, not whether the numbers are accurate or not.
Right.
The spending is there. Bonnie's verified to use that word. She agrees with the school department's assessment as to how much money they've spent in FY16 and anticipatory how much would be spent in FY17 based on the history over the time. The discussion, again, just boils down to is whether we as a board, FinCom, towns come together, should it be an appropriated figure or should the schools continue to depend on revolving funds? And Mike
Or
is
some
correct.
combination thereof,
Combination.
which is typically is what it's
And
been.
Mike did comment correctly as to how we asked them to go back last year and relook at how much money was going to come out of the revolving fund versus what they had originally presented to us. And the school department did indeed do that. So, again, circling back, our discussion here this evening is whether or not it should be appropriated, or we ask the school department to once again do what we asked them to do last year, and indeed they did do that.
Okay,
And if I may, Mr. Chairman,
good.
to that point, the revolving funds, we've been dipping into them more and more over the last couple of years, particularly last year, as PJ pointed out, after discussion with the selectmen, we had a number, we knew we needed to meet that number to be level service in our school district, and the town, we weren't able to meet in the appropriated budget, so we agreed that we would dip into the school choice funding a little more. That was an extraordinary action and irregular action that we took for that particular budget year, but it was a decision that I think we took, knowing that that was a decision we're making for 1 year, not now we're doing this, now it's always going to be this way. Because if we kept making that decision in a couple of years, our revolving fund would be completely gone. And if we had, one student move into the district, we'd be at town meeting. No one wants that. So that's hopefully a little bit of context.
Thank you.
And a little bit of history is helpful too. And certainly, everybody knows I was on the school committee for 8 years, and Mike and I came out at the same time in 2006. And there was a period of time in town where town funding, so the town appropriation piece, had been less than 2% per year over about a 6-year period during our early days on the school committee, 6 through about 12 or so. And we had those conversations. And now even like with the figures Bonnie has presented with us this evening in the packet, we see that over an 8-year period, even at that, it's a 3.4% on average increase over those years. So it's not it's been extraordinary numbers, it's been numbers difficult to deal with just because.
Size of the numbers.
Well,
Not even that, it's just
$1
the
million,
pressures.
$10 million, it's not the size of the numbers. I mean, they're going to grow each year. We're going to have, when it's all said and done, nearly $45 million total budget when everything's thrown in for the town. So, and it was less than that when I began this program, that's for sure. So I'd hesitate to say it's the size of the numbers. I think to put in context, as I said, so over these last 8 years, it's been a 3.4% increase. Gladfully and very much appreciative of that, what the town has done. So now the school department is just telling us, is that the right number at this point? Or do we continue doing revolving fund and keep that at a perilously low number?
Okay. FinCom, comments?
Well, one approach, the discussion is, I think, just that, how much comes out of revolving funds and how much other. I think the other thing we were just discussing here is that, if you have a plan going forward, so how do we want to do this? And then do you all have to do it all in 1 year? This is a big bump. The other, yeah, obviously did that.
Any other comments?
I think I'd just like to see us continue to work better together and maybe have more frequent meetings and not get these numbers 3 days before we're gonna meet on it. Maybe get them a week or two in advance so we can review and discuss them. I think it just goes a long way to help us.
The only thing I would say to that is, this number has been out since November. It actually was bigger, and we've trimmed it down. So this is certainly not the first time that this type of number has been floated as part of the budget exercise. We've been participating all along the process. We were at the budget summit at the police station where every department comes in, and that's where we first put out the number. We then started working it with the town admin team, and we've trimmed it back, getting towards what the increase is gonna be. We certainly haven't had any discussion yet among any of the boards, as far as I haven't witnessed, about how we're gonna fund the overall town budget, which I hope is gonna be the next step. But in terms of providing the information was provided. Now, I happen to think that the stuff that went out Friday is probably the most clear representation that we've done so far, and we're happy to use this as the new line in the sand to say, hey, when we put it out, it'll look like this. I'm fine with that, and we'll continue to work with that, and if we want to talk about, hey, maybe it can be even better as we go forward, great. But let's just make sure that we're all on the same page. The number's been out there, we've been talking about it, we've broken it out by cost center prior to this effort tonight. So this shouldn't really be a huge surprise to anyone that this is the ballpark we're in, because we stated it back in November, and here we are now.
Has Betsy offered, though, a possible road to a compromise on this? Because of the big bump, to use your words, Betsy, and perhaps is it too big a bump this year, and we look at something different? I know we asked you last year to go back, and you did. So do we ask this year, go back and look at some instead of all?
I mean, nobody has yet. I fully anticipate that to be the case, and it won't be a shock, nor will it be disconcerting to us. We're perfectly ready to go through that process. That's the process we go through every year. I will say that, given that we haven't even finalized the increase in the levy yet, it would, from our perspective, be somewhat premature to think about strategies until we know, exactly as a town, where are we in terms of how much we think we're gonna be able to afford versus the decisions you guys need to go ahead and make.
Well, but we've been working that right along. We know what the town side budget's gonna be. We've known that for a long time.
We know what the town side budget's gonna be, but we don't know what
And we had your number for a long time. But that was a number that nobody paid any attention to because it was outlandish. $2 million? You're kidding me. There's no way we're gonna be able to do that.
So
now we're waiting and we're
Okay,
waiting. And
it's
we're
not $2 million,
$11,
and it was
we now
never
have
two-
$1 million something.
It was never 2 million, it was 1.3, 1.2 was the initial. Okay, so it was never 2, and none of the meetings I was at, did anybody ever tell me we were being outlandish? I wouldn't have surprised me if you did.
Well,
I was sort of waiting for the
Pretty
pin to
obvious.
drop, but, well, you say that, but nobody said it, Alan, so I can't say that it's obvious. If nobody says it, I don't read minds, and we're waiting for input and feedback.
Yeah, but I want to go back, we've already discussed that and acknowledged the efficacy of the numbers are accurate. They're good. So I don't see it solves anything for us this evening to discuss that at this point. It's the $300,000, or it's actually 400 and change when the substitutes and the occupational therapy is thrown in. So that's 472, give or take. That's the discussion item. And now we seek, do we have a compromise, or at least a path to a compromise? Thanks, Betsy, because it's brilliant. Wasn't Glavy, he's not brilliant. I can't say Glavy's brilliant in public. What do you think?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Mr. Chairman, just a
sir.
suggestion. During my career, I've had an opportunity to deal with a number of different FinComs and Board of Selectmen. And what really helps in this process, and I can understand why the FinCom perhaps feels a bit out of touch, and I think part of it is a process that we use. This is the first district I've ever been in my career where the FinCom doesn't sit down with the school committee and the administration and go over the budget. What we do in this town is we have Bonnie act as a
We come to the budget subcommittee meetings when we're invited to them.
Right. No, I'm not disputing that, but you certainly,
And we have reps
You certainly
finance
didn't.
committees assigned to the school committee. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
you
Go ahead.
certainly didn't have an opportunity to go into the budget detail that I sense that you would like. And that's the point I'm trying to make. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and a couple of FinCom members were present at that meeting. We're greatly appreciative of that. But sometimes what happens is the
Prior to
context
that,
of
we
the
told the numbers
numbers
weren't ready yet.
are lost. So just something to think about.
2 days before.
Anyway,
Let's use that for process in the
Yes.
future, after this
I
little
think that's
piece.
the point I was trying to make all along, Mr. Abell, is we just gotta work together and continue to work together and improve the process.
Greg, I'm with the kumbaya too. But the Army used the term 5-meter target, and I'm an Air Force guy saying that, okay? The 5-meter target is the budget right now. And what we think we can start to achieve based on the FinCom suggestion, how's that, the entire FinCom gets credit. Now, the thing is, do we try to hash it out this evening?
That's why we're here, right?
Excuse me?
That's why we're here. Right?
Or do we ask the school committee to get back with Bonnie and some FinCom members and come up with that solution and present it to us? Or do we try to do it tonight, as I said?
Can it be done tonight? Can we sit here and deliberate through $432,000 question with the three committees and boards? Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I guess my first question is, have you guys decided how much the levy's going up this year in terms of percentage in dollars? Or is that still to be determined?
There is a discussion tonight we're gonna have.
And I think we will be, personal opinion at this point, it's not the board's position, because we haven't had that complete discussion yet. I'm convinced we'll be able to fund what we want to buy in this town. Okay, when we finish the levy discussions and the like, what we decide in total, as the three committees here, we're trying to do the best for the town, is we're going to spend what's necessary. So I would say we work towards the numbers being accurate at this point, and now how much comes out of the school York funds, if you will, and how much comes out of appropriation. And let's work toward that number, and that becomes the real number for us to deal with. And then those levy discussions are somewhat, how much can we or cannot, I think, get driven by some of those real numbers.
Mr. Glavia, so your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, as a, starting point, looking back over the process, I'd say the requests that the school committee made specifically stand on their own 2 feet, and I find them, reasonable. I also think that they have been cooperative, and we've made progress in making our process better. There's a way to go on that front, but if what we're looking at here is just a $400,000 delta, and the principal variable is whether or not we want to fund all of that, whatever, $1.7 million, let them continue on the path they were, or put it all under the levy because it's a constant expense. Well, then, to me, it just sounds like that's something that cries out for, a phased-in solution, because we didn't get there overnight, so why would we expect to be able to solve it in one fell swoop? So if that's the ground, maybe we need to hear from the school committee and the administration, at a couple of different levels of funding, what would that cause them to do and what impact would it have? And, that's not to say that there aren't other variables in their spending request, but that's the big one. So if we can make progress on that, we're awfully close to getting things wrapped up.
Mr. Chairman.
I think some of this also depends on the other conversations we have. I mean, there's a request out here for extra police officers. There's only one pot of money.
Right.
So it goes here, or it goes there, and town clerk and some of these other, and those aren't significant. But, I mean, some of it's the whole picture, and that's.
Right.
The budget as we're looking at it right now assumes that we know what the levy limit we're planning is 2.5%, right? Okay, so that's what we're working on right now. If that changes in any way, that changes the delta. And right now, from what our finance team tells us we can afford to do versus what the school department thinks they need is $365,000 some odd dollar difference. So we have to make that up. Then we have to deal with the town side issues of we need a new engineer, police department needs people. We have several other town side departments that are looking to increase. You can't do that, and we can't do everything all at one time.
Okay. So, go ahead, Mr. Venuti.
I'm going to refer to a lot of the things that the school committee said. So, again, I agree with Mike. This is a great format to start with. We should work together during this next few months to finalize something for next year. This is a great format that Mike put together. If you want to refer to his funding sources and uses chart, and this is something that we've asked for many years, total spending.
Help us again with the chart you're on, please.
School department funding sources and uses estimated.
Okay, I've been shown four
FY16
different charts by people now.
Has two columns, 16 and 17.
It's not on that page.
I don't know what page it is.
Hey, can we number pages from now on? How about that on process improvement?
Page 4 or 5.
Page numbers.
That came right out of what we got from Bonnie.
I kept reading one mic said.
Oh, we don't have
No.
They emailed it after.
Do you have it in email?
Yeah, 5 of them.
You don't have it?
This was the packet that Mike sent out on Friday.
Yeah, I got it.
The chairs got it. Both chairs
Is
got
that,
it.
is that a
No, that's not it.
scaled down version of that
No,
though?
no.
I'll see if I can walk you through where I was. Very bottom line, estimated FY16 total spending of $20,289,787. Okay? School department is saying we're going to totally spend $21.6 million in 17. That's a change of $1.3 million, they're saying. Okay? They're going to divvy up that $1.3 million by taking an extra 190 out of their reserves, and they're looking for $1.1 million out of their appropriation, an extra appropriation. Okay? But let's go back to 16, because that's the number we want to start with here. So if we go with the $20,289,000, okay? Actual spending. And then we
No,
go-
hold on, that's not actual spending. That's a budget, that's a budget.
Okay, budget. So we're talking budget increase, so here's our budget, $20,289,000. If you go to Bonnie's memo, that little chart that she was looking at, that she walked us through, and you look at actual spending now, actual verified increases for spending. She has salary
Is this where you-
increases of
Steve,
550.
is this the one you're looking at?
Yes.
Okay.
So Bonnie has actual salary increases of 555,000. Add that, so we're gonna add all these to the 20,289,000. 555. The next one is water bill, 5,000. Staffing, 120. Curriculum, 100,000. In case, 37,000. Okay? Those last three items, everybody has agreed, are already in the 20,289,000. No changes in the spending.
No, we don't agree on that. We don't agree on that.
You said you're paying for this stuff now. It's in
Yeah,
the
but the
numbers.
FY16 is a budgeted number, Steve. It changed after we started spending and we started incurring costs. It changed. The school choice number of $400,000, we're not gonna spend $400,000, we're gonna spend $550 at least.
Not talking about your revenue side.
Yeah, but
I'm talking about the expenses.
the reason that we're gonna spend
2 million,
$550 is,
2.7 million in
the reason that we're
special
gonna-
education costs, the
the-
same in both years.
the, re-
True?
the reason that
True?
we're gonna spend 550 is because the actual number of our spending has changed from the budgeted number. So stating that we're gonna jump off the FY 216 budget here that's here is just for tracking purposes. Okay, that's how everybody does it. You show what you budgeted, you show what you're gonna budget next year, and you show the difference. But that doesn't mean that's what we spent. We spent more because we incurred more. So that changes the landscape. So you're kind of comparing, it was an apple and now it's an orange. So, because the actuals changed.
So, Mike, could we see that, because when we look at the other budget, it's really not just budget to budget, it's budget actual on the next year's budget. What we're looking here at last year's budget versus next year's budget, but the actual number isn't in there, right?
The actual number of how much we need to spend, the FY 2017 budget number is reflective of two things. The actual things that are happening in FY 2016 as we experience them right now, plus what we are projecting for increases beyond what think we're gonna spend in 2016, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that's pretty typical. You take not what you thought you were gonna spend in the previous year, you're gonna take what you're actually spending.
But isn't what you're actually spending in your request for 17?
Yes,
So
It is.
looking from budget to actual for 17 should include those costs,
Okay, may I,
right?
are we going backwards? Do we not agree on the numbers anymore?
yeah, I guess that is the
Should
question.
we not agree on, in other words, we all thought we said the numbers was correct. Are you saying they're
And I'm
incorrect?
proving that the numbers are correct, yes. Bonnie's numbers
Okay.
are correct. Because
Whoa, whoa,
if you
whoa, whoa.
look-
What-
Can I finish? If you take the actual spending, which we just now found out, that the 17 budget includes those extra costs, so no matter where your starting point is, if it's a lower starting point and have a higher ending point, I'm including that when I'm requesting. True? True. I'm looking at the actual increases here from this list that we all agreed was correct.
I'm willing to stipulate, everything you're saying is 100% correct. I don't know how it contributes to us getting to a solution though, Steve.
The solution is, if you add all those numbers up, the actual spending that they should be looking for this year is a $627,000 increase. And Bonnie's saying 697. Do I have faith in Bonnie's number? Absolutely. By the actual data that the school committee just presented to us.
Go ahead, Mike, you wanna
No,
respond?
I'm not gonna comment on that, because we've already gone around it, and PJ's right, we all agree that the 1.1, the efficacy of that number is accurate. And that is the number that we are putting forward.
Okay. Finance Committee? I mean, I can't see it as coming to some type of resolution tonight. I think that if we can get a group from school committee, your administration, along with our administration, and the Finance Committee, a member of the Board of Selectmen, just sit down and go over these numbers, because you're right, Mike, I mean, you start out as a budget as X, as you progress through the year, your budget numbers may change. But, you know, a mid-year spending plan may be helpful here, so we can identify the changes in your spending and be able to better sit here midway through the year to say, okay, now I get what you're saying. You do start out with a budget, our spending habits come to this mid-year, now we can project out the rest of the year to get an actual figure and kind of tie it back into what Steve's looking for.
So we're happy to sit down. I mean, really, at this point, we're certainly, I don't think we need to sit down and crunch these particular numbers, because we have shown where the increases are and what we expect. At this point, if we want to talk about strategies for how much reliant we want to be on revolving funds and work out scales and things like that and scenarios, sure, absolutely, that's probably a good idea.
And then maybe take it to the next level, once we do figure that out, to come up with a process to, you know, as you said, this is probably the most comprehensive that we've seen. Maybe put in some mid-year column, so we can understand mid-year spending, and be able to get to a better point moving into fiscal year 18.
Sure, we can
So-
think about
Try
that.
that.
But I think really though, the only variable comes out as is, if I go to the next sheet, which I don't know if you've got that up, available there for a second. I'm not gonna talk about that
Yes,
number.
absolutely.
There, you know, so in the plan right now, I think we're estimating to use, or projecting to use $250,000 out of circuit breaker.
Correct.
And then if I read all of our spreadsheets right, that will give us an estimated remaining balance for end of FY '17 of 668. And then if I notice back in the 16 column, we'd originally projected using $400,000, but currently have spent estimating $550,000, representing $150,000 of unanticipated costs that we had to cover. This year, we obviously caught that by using the circuit breaker, school choice, not circuit breaker funds for it. So I think really the only question that comes on the table is what's the desired balance you want us to hit for the end of FY17 in our school choice account, because the other ones are all designated and are going to be used per regulation and requirement. So the only variable we have is the remaining, its final balance in school choice. We're showing here an estimate of 668. There could be flexibility in that, I'm assuming. We could bring that down to whatever number is comfortable for us to hold in reserves for things such as $100 to $200 to $300,000 of unanticipated costs coming in during the year.
And that's why that history that TJ provided us earlier was helpful in terms of understanding where school choice has been and where those revolving funds have been over the last several years. Because we did have that incident last year where we said, you know what, to meet our budget this year, we as a town aren't able to raise the appropriate amount of money that we believe we need, so we will dip into that school choice funding more than we're comfortable with in those circumstances. This year, the conversation is exactly as, I think, as Daryl just put it, where it's a question of, okay, given that that happened last year, given that our revolving funds are getting smaller and smaller each year, and that our flexibility is now in question when certain things come up during the budget, as you said, mid-year budget changes take place. Given all of that, what do we want that funding level to be? What do we want the financial health of the schools to be from a being agile in terms of different budget situations that come up?
So I think in terms of if you wanted to make a decision tonight, we could get some guidance on where both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee would be comfortable us hitting a target for reserve, funds available in those accounts.
I'd like, instead of, I'd rather a smaller
Yeah.
working group to determine, we can get,
Well, no,
you know
the
where
smaller
we're
group
sitting
could
right
work
now.
to figure out whether we can meet that target.
Well, I think, based on the $432,000 is the delta we're looking for to make up. That's the number. So, based on that, I think if we can get the smaller working group together to determine those reserve levels and where the administration's comfortable with, we should be able to get at least a comprehensive, cohesive type solution for the town to present in May.
One thing that would be helpful during this process, and I know you probably don't have an answer at this point tonight, hopefully later tonight you will, but the question of how can we change the number, it's helpful to know how much we might need to change the number to figure out how we would do that. If we know we're getting, using examples here, if we know we have to get rid of $400,000, that's a drastic situation for us. We say, okay, well, we have to go back and start from scratch. If it's, if it's going to be $25,000, we say, oh, okay, well, it's a very different conversation on our end. So
Well, I think
having
432 is the target number at this point, unless I hear anything different.
432 completely from the schools.
Correct. That's the issue that we're, whether it's, I'm not saying fully responsible for, but we need a working group together to see what your levels are, what you feel comfortable with out of that 432 and say, that's it, that's all I can do. We don't know that. Let's get a working group together to make that determination. And then we can come back here next Monday. We got a meeting on the 21st. See if we can wrap this up before, for next week.
So I guess my question would be, what would the town's level be? So we put in 1.1, there's that 430 where there's that gap. What is the town's ability to, at what point does it go from possible to impossible from a town appropriation perspective?
432 is the number we need to work on as a town.
Yeah. Between appropriation
Correct,
and revolving
as a
funds.
town.
The
As a
432
town.
is the total number, and where does it fall as a ratio in there is with this working group, I think, as the chairman's suggesting, is what we'd work with, okay?
Thank you.
Any other comments, FinCom, school committee members? No. All right, thanks, and I think it's never any fun during budget season. It's, the best we can do is communicate. The more communication, the better off we all are, so I appreciate you guys showing up tonight. Having these discussions aren't always easy, but these are discussions that have to be had, so.
Can we ask Bonnie to broker the meeting?
I'm just making notes to send out something.
There you go. Well, that's not the only budget we're working on tonight, but that was the big one anyways. Bonnie, you wanna pick up from where we left off? Yes.
And next year, when we're gonna set our meeting schedule, maybe we set these joint meetings on the calendar leading up, as we'd like to see them, you know, already get them scheduled. We do our own.
Sure.
You know.
So another suggestion, as Selectman Hebert just brought up, you know, moving forward, if we can get a earlier scheduled, I know we had one earlier, but due to good basketball play, kind of mesh our schedules together, we'll be happy to do it a little bit earlier next year too. And set the schedule now so we can have a better
Yeah,
idea.
there is a joint schedule, this one eroded, though,
Okay.
for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So,
We'll work on it.
we can do it earlier.
All right, go ahead, Bonnie.
Additionally, I have been requested to look at budgeting below the levy limit increase of 2.5%, which is a statutory increase. So at the fully allowed 2.5%, the levy would increase at a rate of $761,000 for fiscal 2017. If we only programmed it at 1.5%, it would reduce the levy increase to $456,000, or by a reduction of $304,000. At the level that the school is requesting their appropriation increase, I have about a $356,000 deficit. So if we took the $304,000 off the table, that would increase the deficit by that level also, just to kind of put that into context. So I did, with Steve Venuti's help, provide some analysis attached to show what that would look like and what the savings could be to the, I say savings, but the reduced increase on the average residential tax bill. But I did want to point out that under the financial policies, there are some benchmarks that do need to be met in order to raise less than the 2.5%. One is that the reserve levels need to be met, which they are for fiscal 2017. For the 3-year financial forecast, we don't have any structural deficits, which we don't at this point because we haven't really finalized any of our appropriations. And even with my $700,000 for the school increase, it's showing a deficit for next year. And then that the town reaches and maintains the OPEB ARC funding level, which is the annual required contribution, which isn't met yet for 2017. But it was requested to show what the impact would be, and there are some sheets in the back here.
Ms. Ravello, I know this is near and dear to you, if you'd like to.
Well, I stated earlier, all these come together because no one stands alone. To include how much we have in undesignated fund balance, which is roughly $7.5 million, and that's a conversation we're going to have a little bit more in depth with later on. Bonnie, if you would walk us through, please, as to how the undesignated fund balance increases year on year.
Sure. Undesignated fund balance, it's also termed free cash, but it's neither free nor cash. It is an accumulation of revenues that are not budgeted as being received, so revenues in excess of the budget, and expenses that are not expended and turned back into the town. So it's in a school district, a regional school district, it's the excess and deficiency account. So appropriations that you didn't spend and revenues that you didn't program. We have by policy, we try to build free cash or undesignated fund balance each year by not programming 10% of new revenues that come in, and by closing accounts that need to be closed within 3 fiscal years of not being spent. The reason we do that is because it helps us fund our reserves and our capital plan. If we don't generate free cash, we don't have a capital plan to spend unless we move that entirely into the operating budget. So healthy free cash is important for the town. It also acts as a buffer. We keep a certain amount of free cash just unspent in the operating budget to allow for the state, if they come in and say, we're going to do some 9C cuts, we're going to cut revenues mid-year, it means that we won't have to go back to the operating budget in that given year and make some draconian cuts, say at a special town meeting. So it's good fiscal policy, it's good fiscal planning. This amount of $7.7 million in free cash is a 10-year accumulation of good financial policy planning. So it didn't just appear in the last year, it's been slowly increasing each year since 2006. But it's at the level at this point that we could start looking at appropriating it into other reserves or planning for future projects, any capital projects, any other items like that. Because we have met our reserve levels that are required in operating. So,
Excellent, thank you. So there are myriad uses of it, although it's a finite number of uses under municipal government and law in the state of Massachusetts, I should think. In essence, though, we've been raising more money and spending a little bit less each of those years. That's allowed to accumulate. Okay, and one of the ways we raise money is by taxes in the town. I'm of the mind that we can give the taxpayers a little bit of a rebate, if you want to call it that, this year. That's why I've asked us to consider. And I've had conversations with Stephen Udy, our treasurer, who's had certainly some ideas on how we can perhaps approximate, if you will, the objective I'm trying to achieve, and that is some sort of taxpayer relief for this year. We at this board speak very often of how we want to lower taxes. It's a dream that we probably can't get to, but can we at least lower the rate of increases? Or, as we've all seem to have agreed, this year, 16 and 17 are perhaps the best we've had when it comes to new growth, past history, and then certainly looking forward. So at what point do we continue to collect taxes from folks when we have an opportunity to perhaps look at something different and give just a little break? It's not going to be a heck of a lot of money, but it's at least that we're cognizant of the toils that our residents have to go through each and every day working, and then their residential taxes paying so that we can support the town and support the amenities, the services, everything that's here, for sure. And we've had a very lengthy discussion about school being the biggest service provider when it comes to total dollar outlay in the budget. But I just see that we have that opportunity. If we choose not to do it this year, I think we're sort of saying we will never do it going forward, if we truly believe that these couple of years here are the best we've seen in a while and best we're likely to see in some years. So that's why I'm asking that we look at this. I'm plenty happy, the different ways we may skin the cat to offer relief, but we should be, as prime objective of FY17, offering that relief to our taxpayers. And Bonnie's outlined some ways to do that. And it doesn't have to affect the appropriations we've talked to. And that is because we have built up a sizable chest of money. Now, we have the policies, and the policies are good. And I've been on the financial policy working group myself, along with members from FinCom. We presented to FinCom, presented to you, and later on this evening, we'll be addressing that complete policy packet for acceptance. And policy is useful. It's useful for guidance. It's useful to help us make sound decisions. But also, sometimes circumstances come along where the policy may not necessarily apply, or at least maybe some different judgment as to how to use that policy. So that's why I meant this, and I like what Bonnie has done. She showed us different options as to what we can do and what the savings would be to the average taxpayer here in the town. And I'd ask that, if you want to shoot the idea down, I'm but one person, but certainly that's what I'd like us to consider.
Board members, comments?
Well, I'd like that each of the options will spell out impact, so thank you. Oh, thank you, Steve. It's very helpful. For the full sheet.
So in essence, it's the 300 and somewhat thousand would have to, 330, would have to make up somehow from somewhere. And you're suggesting?
It's the undesignated fund balance, yes.
Okay.
Because I'm not interested in hurting some very valuable things that we've talked about tonight already, and we're going to talk about a little bit more later on when we talk about some of the other departments. And even if we see it as a one-time event, it's still something that we're providing back to the town and showing that we're trying to do the best we can to limit tax increases.
Pleasure of the board?
So this, let me just ask a couple questions. So this would require us, in order to be in compliance with policy, and I understand what you're saying about policy, if we did want to be in compliance with the policy, we'd have to take some of the UFB and fund OPEB in order to be within the policy.
Correct.
any use, it's a progressive use, so if you're gonna go past the normal reserves and then the capital, which we've already planned for, then you fund OPEB, and then it's available within the scheme of the 2.5 million other uses. But you don't go buy OPEB.
Doesn't mean you have to fund up to 20% of that either.
Correct.
So I think the impacts, well, you can probably speak more intelligently than I could about what the impacts would be to the average taxpayer.
Well, if in this example, say you just took 330 and applied it to the rate for this year, and then kept, the levy limit doesn't decrease by doing this. So in the next fiscal year, the 1% that was left on the table is still there, plus the 2.5%. So the taxpayers could get a 3.5% increase in the following year, if the budget is set at that level. So that's kind of the downside of it. You could get a low increase this year and then a bigger one in the following.
Because ultimately, the free cash is what, it's a non-recurring revenue, even though we get it every year.
We hope to.
It is technically, it's a non-recurring revenue which we don't use to pay for recurring expenses.
Thing is,
And that's the difficulty of applying it to reduce the budget.
well, I'm not asking to reduce the budget, because the budget's going to be what it is. What I'm asking is that we look at it, it doesn't have to go to 3.5% next year. Bonnie's correct in saying that the levy limit remains, and that's how it will be added. But we could continue going forward at 2.5%.
Except you'd have to plug the money that you put in from free cash this year to make the spending plan whole. You would have to do next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, unless you replaced it with property tax at some point. It's not,
Well, it'd be a one-time, what I think BJ's saying.
Same with Keith is saying on that. The thing is, we've built this up over this period of time. At what point do we stop building it? And I know we're looking at putting a bunch of it into other accounts, or stabilization fund, I shouldn't say other accounts, but stabilization fund. But it's been the delta between revenues raised and expenses expended. At what point do we stop doing that?
but because it's a non-recurring revenue, that's why the fiscal policy working group recommendation is to apply the free cash to the non-recurring expenses of basically major capital projects as well as OPEB, because we know that we're going to have those major capital projects. We can see them, whether it's a fire station or just a long list of big projects that are coming. Those will have to be paid for with our public funds, and that if they could be, and that those, whatever those costs might be, that would come from a property tax can be less if you apply these non-recurring revenues to those non-recurring expenses. It still ultimately goes to taxing the public less than what they would otherwise have paid for those projects. But it does so in a way, non-recurring expenses, or revenues rather, apply to non-recurring expenses, that you don't create a spiral that you can't fill without raising taxes.
And everything you said is not lost on me, except when I see the rate at which we've been increasing the UFB, maybe we can slow down that increase.
Well, one of the reasons why it increases is when we take in more from local receipts than we estimate. And the building permits just is but one example of, where the actual revenues that came in vastly exceeded what the estimate was, and that difference shows up in free cash. Just one example.
Excellent. And earlier this evening, we had a very lengthy discussion on, trying to budget more closely.
But part of that exercise is we don't budget the spikes in our operating budget. The normal revenue stream for those accounts are $250 a year, and we got $750 in one given year. So we can't budget that because it's not going to be sustainable in 2 years. It's going to go back down to the norm.
Don't disagree.
So that's why it goes into undesignated.
And so Fred joined us from the Finance Committee?
If the goal of this discussion is to give the taxpayer in town approximately $300,000 $300,000 tax break spread across the whole town. On a 1 or a 2 year basis, you could accomplish the very same thing by taking some of the undesignated funds, which we're looking at as one-time funds, and paying off the debt service of outside 2.5 debt that we're paying every year, because that gets added on top of the tax bill every year. So what you could do basically is skim that off the top. The taxpayer realizes the, I don't know, $40 or $50 or $60 benefit for 1 or 2 or 3 years, however long we could afford to do that. And you would afford them the same benefit that Paul is trying to afford them by cutting the, excuse me, by cutting the levy limit. So there's just another way to skin the cat, and it may be a way to use some of the one-time money that has built up over time. Just something else for you to consider, that's all.
Mr. Glade?
I'd like to just offer that we're at the point now where we're actually having this conversation seriously. Then for the first time in, I don't know, forever, we are really in control of all of our financial wherewithal, at least since, the Prop 2.5 age, 1982, I guess. That being said, and I fully support what, the goal you're pushing, and I'm sitting here back and forth as to whether or not we can achieve that this year. What Fred offers, what you say, there are 2 ways of getting to the same place in terms of realizing an actual smaller increase in the tax bills that go out, because we do have debt that is outside of 2.5, and that's a real target we could hit. But I think it's important to underscore too that since what you've asked, I think, Bonnie, to do the modeling on, the targeting is only for those spike monies in the unreserved fund balance, that we're not talking about anything that would impact operating budgets. And even if you're able to achieve it in 1 year, in the undesignated fund balance is smaller the next year, you're not pushing yourself into the position of increasing your taxes higher. You go right back to your normal 2.5% tax to the max. If you're not impacting operating budgets with whatever cut you come up with, then I think you're in fairly safe ground there. But I think good arguments can be made for funding those other items in the list that comes with OPEB and all the other funding mechanisms, or paying off outside debt, or paying a tax increase. Any of those 3 things is going to make a smaller tax bill for me, so I'm happy with that. But I think it's important to recognize what's not on the table while we recognize what is on the table. What's not on the table is doing this, and instead we lose something we just talked about, in terms of school operating expenses, or, what's coming up in terms of, CPC or the other budget requests you've got. They are, within the same budget, 2 very distinct pots of money.
Yes, Steve.
So what Fred and Paul were talking about is scenario 4 on that worksheet. So there's 2 ways to handle this.
Yeah, that's no pressure.
There's 2 ways to handle this. Either the first way, most obvious, is you don't raise that amount, taxpayer gets a break. First you're pegging a number for that debt exclusion amount out. I think this example does it to FY21, the $1,530,000 from the $1,895,000 it is right now. So you're giving the taxpayer a break. Any other time you do this, like the other 3 or 4 examples of 3 examples of the work, if you're taking it out of the levy, as soon as you don't do that, it's a spike to the taxes. By doing it to the exclusion amount and pegging it to somewhere out in the future, there is no spike in the taxes. You're taking the taxes down gradually to come to where they're going to be at that point in time where you're pegging that number. So if you do it out of the levy, it's going to work out. You have to make cuts to come to that number. If you do it out of free cash, you have to make sure that you have that amount available each year in free cash to come to that same number. Because as soon as you don't follow that, it's a spike to the tax rate.
So you and I have had that conversation, and you talked about it, and Fred, I mean, we mirrored each other. I'm plenty happy to do that. And that your idea comes forward is the way to do that. I accept that fully. Because I know the logic of it, I know the sense. The objective is how do we help the taxpayer? Albeit it's a small amount, but at least it's something. And as you described this evening, both of you, I accept that fully.
So the decision, Sergeant, the decision that you're making, I guess, if you're going for this plan to give the taxpayer a break, you can do it inside the levy, where you're gonna have to make cuts to come to that, or out of free cash, where your allocations that you may be thinking of for free cash may change, which you're sacrificing a project or putting some money into stabilization, that type of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word sacrifice, I might rather say trade-off.
Absolutely.
Because it's opportunity cost.
Yep.
As to if we go a dollar here versus there, a dollar's not there.
That's the decision that you need to make.
But debt maintenance and debt reduction, it's in our policies. It's a good way to go.
And doing it from free cash doesn't step on the policy at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm much more supportive of Steve's approach because it's just with the policies and it just fits better overall, I believe. I applaud Paul, and I said this before, we should always be looking at, not just how do we spend it, but should we be spending it, and where are we with this, right? We should always be challenging ourselves for that, so I think this is the right conversation to have. In this case, I also think part of this conversation is growth is not free. We have some extra money, we have some extra money in free cash because of the growth. Growth is not free, it means we have more businesses, we have more people in town, we have more students in our schools. And so you have extra money coming in, but you're probably gonna have to spend some more too. We don't wanna add more bodies, we don't wanna do that, but that's the reality of where this comes from. And so I always wanna have the adult conversation. I'm not the politician, right? I'm not elected. So then I gotta go to my next message, which is also, we have a lot of people interested in how we're gonna spend the money, right? We have a lot of big things on the table. People wanna do turf fields, we wanna do a fire station, we wanna do a new library. And so to be talking about all these new things we wanna spend, at the same time telling people we're gonna cut their taxes, I think it's kind of disingenuous. And so I understand the method, and so I think there's ways we can get this, but I still want to have the responsible conversation with people. This stuff is not free, right? So that's where I am on this.
Okay. I don't disagree, we just talked about whether it's free or not, but I'd hesitate using the word disingenuous, because...
Okay, wrong word.
Because when I first brokered this,
Yeah.
first brought it to the table, I said, we pay for stuff that means we may not do something.
Right.
So certainly I've been upfront.
No, you have been, Paul. I apologize, wrong word. I apologize for that. You just, in
To
general...
drive the point home, I agree with you 100%,
Okay.
is that, yes, and that's what we talked about beyond the budget.
Okay.
But our ability to reduce the debt, our ability, and folks get to make this decision too.
Yeah,
It's the beauty of
absolutely.
representative government,
Yeah.
democracy here in the town.
Yeah.
We offer options. But in years past, I've never heard one person say to me, at town meeting I raised my taxes, but I've heard them say to me personally, you've raised my taxes. We all understand the dynamic.
Yes.
It's how you choose to characterize it.
Right.
And I want to offer people the option.
Yeah.
And this conversation, in applying one of these methods, gives people that option.
Yeah.
And folks can certainly say, I'm a taxpayer too, just like everybody else in the room. I'm plenty happy to pay that tax if as a community we come together and say, no, I want this service and I'm willing to pay more for it. Or more, to have all those services and pay for them.
Yeah.
I have no objection to that. But we've never had this discussion, as Paul mentioned.
Yeah, no, just in terms of looking at the options and the spreadsheets there, I'd caution, and I think the final recommendation was the one that was being careful about having a bump, because I mean, even with deferring it out of free cash for 2 years and then putting the thing back into it, you're gonna cause people to plan at one level and all of a sudden it will spike up, even though it was planned before. I think the net result to the taxpayer is gonna get lost in that. And we've gotta be careful, again, I think in terms of projecting to where we want the steady state spending to be and taper to that on it, so I don't have all of the numbers bouncing around here in terms of how the delta of free cash versus the delta of free cash available because of additional projects that came in in terms of what's that steady state number that you could reduce and not affect the operating budgets of all the other pieces there. I think there's a lot of information that goes into processing that. But at the same time, I just have to maybe point out one thing that maybe you could just clarify on page 1 of scenario 1, is it? And I don't know if this is reflected through. It says these examples level fund the school FY16 appropriation. And I guess I'm not sure what that means relative to the FY17, 18, and 19 in terms of, I mean, I don't think we're not anticipating a level funding the schools for the next 4 years to make this scenario work, are we?
No.
It's just creating-
Well, I'm gonna ask that question.
It's just creating a baseline, that's all it is. You need something to compare it to. So the only thing that statement is going to do is to look at the net budget variance. Has nothing to do with the taxes.
Because that language looks different than the other areas, and that's what.
Now it's the same baseline.
This is, so if you look at the base scenario, that very first thing, baseline,
Okay.
767,000 surplus in FY17.
Okay.
So that says that we're not funding anything to the school department over and above last year. That's all it's doing is creating a baseline. So in the next scenario, we're keeping 332,000 off the levy. It brings that number, that surplus down to 400,000. So it's just a baseline, it's just a number to compare something to, because you need to look at how much money you're taking off the table. That's all.
All right, so board members, do we feel comfortable enough to make a decision tonight? Or,
Well, I don't think we could really decide on a scenario we want to take. I mean, I think we all applaud what Paul's trying to say, but I want to make sure the method of the scenario we use won't have some kind of spike, so I want to be able to go through that again.
okay.
Look at the whole picture too.
We can talk about it again on the 21st.
Concur. Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you, and we look forward to your input. Moving on, financial management policy, the amendments to free cash stabilization CPA appendix. Again, this is the working group that was put together and reviewed the fiscal policies for the town, make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and I think we've reviewed it and talked about it. And any questions, board members? I'll look for a motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to receive proposed amendments to the financial management policy as recommended by the Financial Policies Working Group on January 12, 2016, and adopted by the Finance Committee on March 8, 2016, relative to free cash or undesignated fund balance, stabilization fund, excluded debt stabilization, and CPA appendix, and to schedule the adoption of said policy for the Board of Selectmen's next regular meeting on March 21st, 2016.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, roll into 2C, the use of free cash. Spending plan for the May 2nd, 2016 annual and special town meetings. Bonnie, you want to walk us through the table?
Basically, this takes the recommended financial policies and the free cash and walks it through the funding formula. So, again, as I mentioned before, our free cash is certified at $7,799,975. Of that, in most years, we fund our reserves and our capital plan, and we stop at that level. Then the rest will accumulate. But this year, we're looking at going down a little bit further into our financial policies and applying some appropriations into some other reserves and other accounts. Under the policy, the surplus balance in free cash would be $4.4 million. The reason that it's 4.4 is because we need to keep at least 7.5% of our operating budget in unspent, unappropriated free cash in order to meet our minimum requirements. And again, that's $3.3 million. What that does is it accounts for any collections that drop off, any state aid cuts, any problems that we might have mid-year, so that we don't have to have cuts mid-year. We can ride the wave out if we need to. So taking that into consideration, we have the 7.7 million. We're appropriating 101,000 to stabilization just to keep ourselves at the 5% minimum that's required under our policies. Again, that's good fiscal planning. Annual capital projects, we're allowed to spend 2.5% of the operating budget on capital each year. So that amounts to 1.132785. We already have that planned in our capital plan. We have items tied to those specific dollars, and that's something that we do each year. In order to go beyond that spending, we need to fund our OPEB for an additional contribution. Now, you can fund it at up to 20% of the surplus balance of 4.4 million, but at least 10%. So in this example, the 634,000 that I'm showing is the 20%. If you don't fund it at the 20%, you can't take that difference and put it in another bucket, because it says you can fund up to 20, but at least 10. So for this example, again, it's 634. That leaves the remaining amount of $2.5 million that can go into other reserves, other stabilization funds, debt exclusion stabilization, capital stabilization, other capital projects. That equals 60% of the remaining balance, plus an additional 20 that is earmarked for other capital. I combined it for this example into the 2.5 million. It's really $1.9 million plus another 634. And again, if you reduce the OPEB down to the 10% level, it doesn't give you more than the 60% in the other categories. So it would just roll to free cash in the following year and get recertified. So
Based on the policy.
Correct, based on the policy. Gotcha.
We just approved.
We just accept it.
Let's see, so the other thing that I did was, I wanted to just remind the board that there are some other additional amounts that I have not, I reserved, however, they're not planned for appropriation at this point. Specifically, there was $285,000 and a reduction for the SCBA equipment, the fire equipment, because we're trying to get a grant from FEMA for that. And $173,000 that was in a reduction for the PMBC facilities article in capital. So because we reduced it, I didn't allow it to go into the operating budget under our policies. It's reserved and it's available for spending in the fall town meeting or at this annual town meeting. And it's, available out of the one-time funding money. I think that's what I have for the.
Finance Committee, questions?
Oh, snow and ice.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. And any remaining snow and ice funds that, we've had a good year compared to last year. If there's
Jimmy,
any-
don't talk
I
about
know.
next week, Jim.
But as of today, there's $234,000 that, if it doesn't, we're not have it available.
So that
For
would be available.
non-recurring expenses.
Members, questions?
So if we don't get that grant from the SCBA, then we have a way to
Then we need
cover
to,
it.
then we need to address it, yeah. We have it.
Betsy, any questions?
No, we've
Finance
been through
Committee?
and we support it. Yeah.
Right.
Everybody else was, yeah.
Everybody else set? All right, members, any questions? Look for a motion.
Before we do a
Go
motion,
ahead.
I'd like us to consider just putting A, B, and C in, the stabilization fund, capital projects, and OPEB additional contribution. There's good reasons to move money into the stabilization fund. We've talked about some of those, Bonnie, this evening. There's the rating agencies are concerned with how much money we have. But this, at least the consensus I've been able to come at this point, does not affect that in any way, shape, or form. And it remains available. It remains available for us to look at in November as to whether to move that. Because the figure's been certified, the total. Yes.
It's certified through June 30th.
Yes.
If it's not appropriated to another fund by June 30th, then it needs to be recertified.
Next June.
In order to be spent again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Different from what was told this morning. The thing is, it'll be there and it'll be recertifiable. So there's no risk there, is that correct? Okay. So, perhaps not moving that at this point serves many purposes. That's what I'd recommend.
Which one was that?
Well, I would,
Capital Stabilization Fund for $2.5 million.
just for that one fact, not having it available, I would recommend that we put it in the stabilization fund so it is available. We don't have to wait. Putting it in there is just putting it in the savings account, so to speak.
So,
That's
okay,
my point.
I think we're gonna have to make sure how we characterize that capital stabilization fund then, because certainly in the working documents, we don't have it. If it's going to go in there and it becomes available for capital items across the board, I can concur with that, as long as that's our intent.
It's right now a capital stabilization fund, not designated for anything.
Okay, so,
Just gives us the opportunity.
And Bonnie, could I ask, excuse me, Chair, could that money then also be used if we chose to go forward with one of the plans discussed, especially Steve, to use that to pay off some of this outstanding debt?
Yes, it could.
And while we don't have a formal mechanism for designating, we've certainly done it as a practice over time. And we've made contributions. We did that with open space preservation and with the high school savings before we had some of these newer accounts where, it was voted and stated at the time and recorded, that it was reserved for a purpose.
I'm just looking, as we're speaking, I'm looking at the motion to see if I'd be happy with it, and certainly, I understand everything you're saying. I just want to ensure that the capital stabilization fund, the 2.5 million, is indeed, it's undesignated. We're moving it to satisfy a certification issue with the state, because it wouldn't be available until the following May town meeting. This would authorize our ability to use it in November town meeting for things that the town came together and felt were important to the town as a whole.
Correct.
We're all in agreement with that? I can go with it in that way.
All right, look for a motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to the financial management policy as amended to apply the following amounts from free cash undesignated fund balance to the spending plan for the May 2nd, 2016 annual and special town meetings. A, stabilization fund, $101,265. B, capital projects, $1,132,785. C, OPEB additional contribution, $634,044. D, capital stabilization fund, $2,536,176 for a total of $4,400,004,270.
Second.
Moving and second, all those in favor? Thank you very much. All right, next agenda item is FY 2017 operating budget, staffing priorities, police, town clerk, and veterans agents. Chief, deputy chief, you want to come on up? We'll take the police on first. Recently, we have been preaching or recommending a level staffing budget throughout town side finances. Last week, we had the board voted to increase highway by 1 for an engineer, which is going to be paid for through savings from our engineering costs that we're right now contracting. So Chief King asked to be on to request 2 additional officers. Town clerk is looking for some more hours, and the veterans agent is looking for some more hours. Chief, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As you recall, back in November, I talked to you about 2 officers on the day that we presented our overall budget. That still hasn't changed. Since then, I have obviously crunched and recrunched budget numbers. The budget impact for the 2 officers is $91,000. That's $42,000 in benefits, and then a $49,000 increase to the police budget for an impact of a total of $91,000. As I explained to you in some of the paperwork I sent to you, our current staffing level allows us to, on the day shift, evening shift, run 1 sergeant and 2 patrol officers. The split shift, which covers the 2 3-to-11s and 2 day shifts, for lack of a better term, the relief shift, currently runs at 1 sergeant and 3 patrol officers. There's 2 patrol officers plus the K-9 on that shift, and late nights currently just runs 2 cars. The late night shift, I would say to you, looking at their activity and what's currently going on, I have no problem staying at 2 cars. except on Friday and Saturday nights, once the point fully comes online. And then we'll have to make some adjustments till probably 2 o'clock in the morning, just to allow for the 1 o'clock licenses to allow, and also the late movies coming out of the O'Neill cinemas. As you saw in what I sent over you to, over 200 nights, currently on 200 shifts a year currently, just due to vacation time, personal time, comp time, and training. We run over 200 shifts down to just 2 cars on the day shift and 3 to 11 shift. It's just for those 2 shifts. And with the current activity that goes on in the town demographics, we have 4 major exits off of highways. We have 2 exits off of I-495, 2 exits off of Route 2, and then our town is bisected by so many state highways, Route 2A, Route 119, Route 110, everything dumps into our center or through our town for a lot of pass-through. The point is just starting to come online. We're already going down there for certain calls, shopliftings, panhandling out in the parking lot. We've had several larcenies and thefts, some drug deals, and some one overdose so far. I talked to Chief McEnany today from Westford and asked him to pull me some numbers from Cornerstone Square, which is their newest development over there. It's about it's less than half our size of what we're gonna be. And they've attributed 695 calls last year to Cornerstone Square itself. And those run the gamut from medicals, larceny, shoplifting, lockouts, you name it. It's not, not gonna say it's a den of iniquity and, our felonies are gonna skyrocket because the point is open, because I don't think any of us would have wanted the point to open if that was gonna occur. However, we are gonna have, 5 or actually 6 liquor serving establishments in the point, between the O'Neill Cinema, Tavern on the Square, Great Road Kitchen, which is now open, Taka, Masala Bay, Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza, and the hotel. With that being said, I'm asking to go up to hire the 2 additional officers. I'm gonna we're gonna strictly protect the patrol side. I will tell you up front, my overall goal in my future is to get it up to 20 officers, and that would allow for a full-time SRO and 2 detectives. But we're talking about patrol tonight, so I want to focus on that. The officers, in watching the current schedule, there are many nights that I'll be quite honest, I'm uncomfortable with just 2 officers being out there. We're dealing with a lot more mental health issues as the state has changed its demographic, and it's closing down its facilities, and more people are coming out into the general population, the general public. We're dealing, both police and fire are dealing with mental health issues of having to force people down to mental health facilities on almost a daily basis. Certainly several times a week. Our Section 12s, which is an order that the officers, EMTs, and psychiatrists can sign to actually put somebody, involuntarily down for a mental health checkup is we're using those on a weekly basis also. And not all these, and many of these individuals, for lack of a better term, resist quite forcefully, to go down. And there have been occasions where, 2 officers, I don't think anyone would say that 3 officers is better than 2, or 4 officers is better than 3 when it comes to the levels. This community has grown. 15 Great Road, we're responding to 15 Great Road, which is the apartment complex down there. Noise disturbances, some obviously family disputes, things of that nature. Noise calls are typical of the apartment buildings because you're right on top of each other. You hear what your neighbor's doing above you, beside you, or below you, but we still have to go down there and handle those calls. As I showed you in some of the different time groups, that makes a difference too. Some of the things that have changed over the years, when I came on in 1982, if you made an arrest, you handled it all yourself. Well, now through accreditation and also nationwide policies, things of that nature, an arrest is made by an officer in Littleton, it requires 2 officers to book them. I showed you, typical times for many of those. So for instance, accidents. We had 300 accidents last year. Typically, it's about a half an hour at the scene for 2 patrolmen. It eats up 300 hours of time. Paperwork, another additional hour. It's another 600 hours where those officers are tied up. And of course, I can go on. The arrest, 200 hours is a half an hour at the scene. Booking takes about an hour. And then depending on what the paperwork is, it's 1.5 hours for one patrol, sometimes times 2, sometimes times 3. Currently, right now, if both officers are tied up with an arrest, if a call comes in, you're relying partly on mutual aid, partly on getting the person out of the booking cage, getting them over into a cell secured, and then the officers will leave the station. I fully believe that the department has a need. I fully understand what money is. I've worked for this community since I'll hit my 34th year on May 1st. I've been last year 14 years in management in this town. I don't take adding personnel lightly. I never have. I believe Chief Kelly, in a memo to the board several years ago, talked about the 18th officer. I'm looking for 19 because I'm also trying to keep the community safe. I'm trying to keep the officers who work for the department safe. And I see this more as a safety issue than anything else. I know what money is. I think my budgets show that. I think the budget that I presented here really deeply cuts into overtime, which I would tell you that concerns me to some degree, even at the 2 officers. But I also told you that I would have saved approximately about $40,000 in overtime already this year if I had the current staffing levels. We spend about $1,200 to $1,300 a week just on court time alone. And to be quite honest with you, I was asked by the FinCom, is this going to be a morale problem where we're cutting down on overtime and things of that nature? And no, it's not. The officers, they would prefer to work their shifts, work their time, and then not get ordered in for weekends, not get ordered in, which is a pretty constant. Deputy Chief's in charge of scheduling. He can tell you how often order-ins occur and how often we're running down to 2 cars. And again, I guess I would open it to questions. You have my reports and my sheets to you. And
All right, board members, questions? Mr. DeCoste? I can start out with Mr. Knox if you want.
There we go. Yeah,
Go
good.
ahead.
To be quite honest, Chief, over the weekend, I had the pleasure to talk to a sergeant from another town, of all places, at a hockey tournament, but because he knew I was a selectman and he was a sergeant, we went through a lot of things they do in their town. And the town was almost 2,000 people larger than we are. And they were two officers short, and two less than, right up, how many do we have now?
17.
All right.
Including us.
He was at 16. He didn't give me the explanation, but they had lost 4 officers in the last 10 years, so probably some of the same reasons we had. And then, with time today, out of my work day, I thought I'd just go to see some of these towns, to see some of the comparison, not knowing how many highways they have or anything else. And I guess when I first started off, I found like 1 or 2 towns right away, and I was gonna say, geez, I think our force is too large, or with the extra officers. But then after that, I started finding that was just 1 or 2 out of all of them I looked up. I mean, I had one, and sometimes it's hard to figure out who's a full-time officer, who's a part-time officer, because one department listed everything, and there was 29, and it was, the population of that town was 10,000. I think that was in Hull. All the other ones, believe it or not, have more offices than we do for the same population, so I don't know what the comparisons are, what the demographics are, how many apartments and how many highways they go through. But I don't, this is early to say. I'm hesitant about 2 offices. I might consider 1, going by the unofficial results I have in a number of towns here.
I guess I would say to you, you know, you're absolutely right, Hull does have 29 officers. Town of Swampscott's got 12,000, has 38 officers. You know, and there are other towns that are our size, you know, Mr. Knox, you know, I'll say right out, he told me that he had done some research, and I checked some of the demographics in some of the communities. There's certainly, some of them had, you know, no highways, certainly don't have the business and commercial districts we have, things like that, and some do. You know, some of it's the comfort level of what the town or what the community and, you know, and what you want. You know, again, I would say to you that, you know, I'm looking for 2 officers, specifically why, number 1, first, it gives you the best bang for your buck. And I realize, you know, $91,000 is not a small amount of money to ask for. However, you know, it isn't a 50-50 number to give the 18th and then, you know, the 19th. The 19th gives me a much larger comfort level as far as cutting down on overtime. It gives me a much larger comfort level on our current staffing level. I guess I would ask the deputy to step in real quick here and talk about ordering and things like that, if I can, real quick.
Sure, well, why don't we see if we
Oh,
have
sure,
any other,
sorry.
and we'll wrap everybody else up.
Just to, well, actually, first of all, thank you, Chief King, for presenting this. I think you guys did a lot of, you know, good research here, and safety is obviously one of our top goals. So that being said, obviously, we have the budget conversation. So you answered one of my questions, I think, is on the motion, it says 49,000 salary, but that's for 1 officer, not the 2 is your 91,000 at 19, which is what?
No, it's 49,000 to my budget, and then it's 42 in town benefits, I'm not sure how the.
Per each officer.
No,
No.
that's for the total.
It's for the total.
For the 2, because of the decrease in overtime. That is
Sorry,
expected to
yeah,
offset
decrease
part
in
of it.
overtime.
That's
salary.
Right, the offset in overtime is $52,000 to offset one of the whole salaries.
Okay.
And for the 18 officer, it's a $56,000 budget impact, because the overtime, I didn't quite, you know, I didn't cut it as deep.
I see
Because
what
my
you're
comfort
saying.
level of, you know, I don't wanna come back to the board midway through and say I messed up on my overtime numbers.
All right, I got you. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for doing some of that research, by the way, that was very interesting. But that's all the questions I have.
Mr. Avella?
Chief and I have had opportunities to discuss this in length and look at some studies. Actually, it's been many months, maybe 6 months or so ago, began looking at some of this. It does boil down to a question as to where we feel comfortable as a community. I think Chief has outlaid certainly the reasons, clearly he's outlaid the reasons that he thinks this is a safety issue and how to approach it and ameliorate the safety concerns, both for his officers and for certainly the residents of the town and those people who transit through the town. The highways, we all know that, they get called out on 495 whenever there's a mishap. They and the fire department both, which we receive nothing from the state or the federal agencies because we have 495 going through the town, but it is a burden on us that other towns may not have, just because of the demographics and the infrastructure that supports it. Does another 1 or another 2, you know, fulfill the needs, wants, desires, I guess, of the community, is what we're really gonna have a discussion of. Budget numbers, we may say, well, as much as we want this, we can't afford it. I'm hesitant to say we cannot afford this. To Betsy's clarification earlier this evening, is when we talk about, you know, how do we control taxes, the taxes, how we're gonna pay for these services, no two ways about it. Yeah, and perhaps I'm blabbering on just a little too much because I'm leaning towards supporting it. I just want to hear a little bit more discussion before really coming down and saying, yeah.
Jeff?
Yeah, so, you mentioned bang for your buck. and you mentioned bang for your buck, so if we were to, say, hire 19, go, increase by 2, the savings is $52,000 is the offset? That's
52.5 is the offset out of overtime, yeah.
okay. And to Joe's point, if we were to go with 1 and we decided we were comfortable with 1, that number goes down by
By about $37,000.
37? Okay. So 725.
Go down to or go down by?
If we bring on, if we say,
down-
bring
down
up to
to-
19, add 2 patrolmen,
Yeah.
the offset to the salary would be about 52 grand, so it would be at 91 would be the, What? 90 grand would be our,
That's the net, yep.
okay,
For 19.
for 19. Right. If we go to 18,
It's
it's about a
56.
$25,000
It's
offset.
56, yeah, it's about a,
15,
Yeah.
I think we have.
it's $34,000.
The net impact would be 56,000.
And I appreciate you putting this all together for us, but where exactly is your desire to put these feet of the street?
They'd be on days and 3 to 11. They would cover those 2 shifts.
7 to 15 and
7 to 3, 3 to 11. They would then go on there with currently the relief shift already has a sergeant and 3. The other 2 shifts only have a sergeant and 2. That's where they would stack.
Okay, so 7 to 3, you've got sergeant and 2, chief and deputy, detective sergeant, school resource officer. So that this,
What,
go ahead.
you're absolutely right. There are 4 other individuals around occasionally during the day. There's no guarantee that, that they are, there at all times.
Right, there's no guarantee we're gonna have an arrest either.
Well, no guarantee of anything.
Right. Except yours. If not careful. I did, you mentioned that you understand the impact.
Certainly do.
It's dollars, if it's dollars spent here, it's dollars not spent somewhere else. So I'm kind of leaning more towards where Joe's at right now, where I might be able to support adding 1 patrolman. And I am curious the impact, I don't know if, what the impact is perceived by the patrolman. Is that the input from the patrolman, the union, or?
I got a letter, I got an email from the chief last week. You mentioned that the union had spoke to you, or?
Yes.
Have they taken any official vote, or?
No, well,
Have they?
obviously, they would, prefer to have more people working the shifts with them, but, they also, they fully understand budget impacts and everything else. I mean, they just finished a contract this year also. I would say to you this, and in hearing, well, I guess you want to hear from you
If
first?
that's done, I'm gonna finish.
Okay.
You all set?
Yeah.
So my concerns, I don't see anywhere the CBA impact, you have clothing, you have longevity, you have, is that included
It's
in
all
it?
listed in those numbers. Those numbers all include all the increases.
Okay.
Sorry.
And I guess my question is, can you get us some stats as far as, what you've been doing? And you talk about the increases over the past 3 years. I'd like to be able to see, and maybe that'll determine whether a 1 or a 2 or a none is impacted, to see if, you break it down by hours in the day. Is there a way you can get statistics and data for what you're doing and what you've been doing for the past 3 years?
I certainly can try and look at it, that's why I, kind of made, the average time spent on calls, those are the actual numbers of what we're doing right now. The accidents, 300, the arrests, the 69 domestics, the 100 larceny.
Was that average over 2 years, 3 years?
That's just this year.
This year, and what did you
That's
do
1 year
last
number.
year?
Roughly about the same, roughly about the same numbers. Our major crime now, what has gone down is, I guess I would slack for a better term, which some people may like, is officer discretionary activity. They're not writing as many traffic tickets right now. They're not making as many motor vehicle stops because they are tied up more. You know, the calls today require so much more documentation and paperwork, Mr. Chair, than they used to. You know, everything we do now is, you have to document it. Everything you do has to be in the police report or it did not occur. When I first came on, the reports were more summaries of events. And now they are, you know, they're very regimented on how you do things. You know, for instance, on a domestic situation, you have to put every single thing in there. You have to talk to the judge, you have to file the, you know, restraining order paperwork. It all takes time. And these numbers I came up with, you know, to show you here are what, you know, our actual times that we're doing. You know, and some of this is also to fight off the unknown of, you know, what I had talked about, you know, just from Chief McEnany alone, about Cornerstone Square coming online, and the point, you know, being at 75 to 80% by this November. You know, we've only got Great Road Kitchen currently open down there to speak of, and every other restaurant is gonna be online and open, and the cinema by the fall. You know, so some of that is also anticipating what the increase in volume is gonna be of having a hotel. And, you know, roughly 700,000 square feet, which is about 3 times the size of, well, it's 2.5 times the size of Cornerstone, and then take their Hampton Inn or their Regency and put it in that facility. So some of that is to also, you know, combat what I see in changes coming on to the community, because I'm obviously looking forward, you know. You know, I can only say again that, you know, I've been here a long time, and, you know, this community is important to me, and its safety is, not only is the community safety important to me, but, you know, the officers who work here, safety is important to me.
I got you. So you can't get that? I mean, I'd like just to do a quick comparison over, see some
I certainly
increases,
will try and
you know?
get you some numbers and take a look
Yeah,
at it.
and to see that what did you say, the traffic stops?
The discretionary numbers.
Discretionary numbers are going down, that'd be interesting to see too, just for that fact. I'm gonna go to Deputy, we cut you off earlier.
Yeah, no problem. I take care of the scheduling for the department, and just between vacation times, personal days, comp time, and sick time, for the month of July, August, and September. Not to mention, we were running down because we had one on maternity leave and another officer out with a surgery to a knee. So we were running short, but beyond that, we were running 6 to 7 overtime shifts a week. And that includes going, you know, Monday through Friday, and then the Saturdays and Sundays. And the officers work a 4 and 2 schedule, so they rotate through, so they get to that one perfect time 6 weeks in where they get their Friday and Saturday nights off. They were getting ordered in all the time. So you asked about morale and stuff like that. They're looking for more people, for more help to work the schedule and to keep them from getting ordered in to where they can manage their family lives and their home lives in a much better way. So that's the answer about the schedule.
Gotcha. Mr. Moore, I saw your hand up down there.
Yeah, Jim,
Finance Committee.
when the chief spoke to FinCom last week, I believe he mentioned the percentage of non-Littleton residents that he had to deal with, which I found interesting. And it will only increase with the point coming online. Wonder if you could speak to that?
Sure. You know, our arrests for a community our size average, well, anywhere from 300 a year to 200 a year, depending on different swings. Probably over 90% of those arrests are not Littleton residents. We had 50 some odd OUI arrests last year, and I think out of that, I think 7 of those were residents, and the other 43 were non-residents. These are not 495 arrests. These are, you know, arrests, you know, within our community. You know, we have a high transient traffic pass-through, we all know that, with the 4 exits off the highway and, you know, the roads all bisecting us. And the point is just another, it's another draw, as I pointed out in my original letter. It's just another draw to bring people into our community, especially with the cinema and things like that. And, you know, again, you know.
Okay. Any other questions, board members?
Just one super quick question. The 10 hours of reserve officer, that's included in the 40, the total 91
No,
number?
no,
That's in addition.
no.
Where was that?
I pulled that out of the 19 officer staffing at this point.
Okay.
And I also, I'm waiting to get some clarification. I don't know if you all saw the NBC News or on Channel 4 or whatever it was about reserve officers, and the head of the Mass Criminal Justice Training Council kind of spoke out against their being able to work cruiser work and things like that. So trying to get some clarification from the criminal justice training or Mass Municipal Police training on, okay, the head of Mass Chief says this, what kind of a liability policy does that put us in if, you know, we do in fact utilize these people for shifts work and things of that nature, so.
you're
I'm kinda
removing
waiting
that?
on that, so I'm waiting on
Okay.
that, that's a hold. This is strictly, both these budgets you see in that current sheet that I sent out last week are strictly for the 18th officer and the 19th officer.
Okay. Thank you.
So ask the chief to come back.
Yeah, I would like to, yeah. We got a meeting next week, if you could just get those other stats, maybe you can get some more clarification on your reserve officers too.
Yep.
That'd be
I will do that.
beneficial.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
All right, so, thanks, Deputy. Town clerk, do we have anybody, I don't see the town clerk here, can we speak to that? Go ahead.
The town clerk was requesting an additional 5 hours per week from the 35 that she's currently budgeted to 40. The impact is about 8,900 in salary and 3,200 in fringe. She particularly was looking to have evening hours available, where she does not at this point. And I would, so it's looking to expand the hours that she's open to the public. It's not just an additional number of hours based on her current infrastructure.
Okay. Betsy, have you talked to Diane about this increase at all, or? has she
Fred's
come-
talked to Diane, but I think in general, FinCom just felt like, you know, this was a service to the public and would probably, you know, it's not an additional head count, it's an additional expense, but it's not an additional head count.
Yeah.
And something we were supporting.
Right. Board members, Joe, questions?
No.
I mean, they're not huge numbers, it's, what, 11 grand for the year?
Yeah, I'd applaud town clerk for trying to make herself more available. It's good.
Do you have anything that you want to comment?
Yes.
PJ, comments on the town clerk, we were just debating, or?
As I recall from previous conversations, that we're already going down the road that we need the extra time. And this is paying the piper.
Mr.
Yeah,
DePelli?
just expansion of services, I think it's good for the taxpayers, good for the residents.
Okay. Third is, the third request was for veterans increase, the Director of Veteran Services, by 3 hours a week.
Correct. This is a stipend, the director's paid a $5,000 annual stipend, and for that he has 6 hours open to the public each week. He's currently working at least 9 hours, and the stipend hasn't been changed since I arrived in 2006. And just to give you an example of his caseload, when I came here in 2006, I think he was expending about $12,000 a year annually in benefits for veterans that qualified, and the budget now is about $175,000 in benefits for veteran services. So the impact has been tremendous. He's here all the time. He admitted to the 9 hours. I don't. It might be more than that in actuality, but basically a $2,500 increase would cover the additional 3 hours then.
And you know, we're seeing more and more servicemen and women coming back home. FinCom, questions? Go ahead, Alan?
When I was veteran service officer, at least 10 years ago, we raised the salary from $2,500, I think, to $5,000. That was over 10 years ago. His workload now way exceeds what I was doing at that time. There's just more veterans coming in all the time, and veterans' benefits are expanding. So he might spend 6 hours with the door open, but I can guarantee you spend a whole lot of hours on the phone, other than the door open down there, so. We're getting a good deal.
Sure. Mr. Knox, any questions, concerns?
No, not at all, other than I know that he's there all the time. Put a lot of hours in.
Mr. Lavelle?
Worst thing John Borowski did was retiring from a real job.
For himself.
For himself, yeah.
Mr. Lavelle? Yeah, you know, it's, as I said, there's more veterans coming back to our community. We should at least have the opportunity to speak and see what is available through the VA and the state, so I would absolutely support that. That being said, so we'll wait for Chief King to come back. We'll look for a motion for the other two.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to include in the town's operating budget request for fiscal year 2017 the following increased staffing levels. Second one, town clerk, increase elected town clerk's hours by 5 per week from 35 to 43. Veterans, increase director of veteran services hours by 3 per week from 6 to 9.
Moving and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. All right, moving on, item number 3. Only 3 in this room, right? May 2nd, 2016 annual special town meetings. Complete insertion of articles for town meeting warrants. Mr. Bergman, you want to just walk us through these 3 items?
Sure, we've got,
And we'll have discussion on this, folks. One is going to be, sorry about that, Keith, I just might lay down the groundwork. There is a 234,000, hold on. Thank you, hold on. All right, there we go. There is a $234,593 for the special town meeting for a alumni field renovation design as FY 2016 capital improvement plan adjustments. So we'll have a discussion about that once we, Mr. Bergman reads the rest of them as we go on. Go ahead.
the other 2 items that we have is a request from the trust fund commissioners to move the annual trust fund grants from the annual town meeting to the special town meeting, and specifically that's in order to fund 2 projects they would like to see proceed without delay. One is for $75,000 for an innovation center at Littleton High School. Steve could speak more on it, but the trust fund commissioners, I think, were looking for something to wow them, and they found it in this application, which in essence they're doing several years' worth of funding.
2 years.
2 years' worth of funding all at once, $75,000 for the Innovation Center. Also, there was an unexpended trust fund that was available only for animal services, and we were able to put together an application for animal care assistance program that would be administered by the Department of Elder and Human Services, essentially making funds available to qualifying low-income households for animal-related expenses, which is specifically what those dollar amounts are earmarked for. And then the final category is, and I see we have many members of the Community Preservation Committee here with us. CBC met with us last week, went over their list of funding projects, and we're going to complete that list at their meeting earlier tonight and then report to us.
You want to come on up, Mitt? I see other members in the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Community Preservation Committee met earlier tonight, and we still constitute a quorum here as well. But just to report on the item pertinent to the town meeting, the committee voted in unanimous support of town meeting Article 8. There's a list you're probably familiar with. I went over the details, right, it's projected here. Last time we met, I described the 6 projects that are before us. The first 3 lines of this...
Is it this total?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are administrative expenses and debt service. and the remaining 6 lines relate to the, or 8 lines, whatever it is, relate to the 6 different projects brought before us. If you don't have any specific questions about them, I'll just highlight the total budget number at the bottom. $315,323 is the budget that we approved. Many thanks to Town Hall for help assembling that. I'd like to say 1 or 2 other things, if that would be all right.
Absolutely.
Since the Board of Selectmen this year is looking for us to define appropriations to reserve of other blended funds, this budget makes use of some blended funds, but there's still more that have come to us and remain in the CP funds at present. We aim to work on this before early April Board of Selectmen meeting, so that it's convenient to the board to get these numbers before the voters. So it would outline in, well, it'll determine, the details are yet to be determined. We'd like to make clear our interest in whether we want them to be assigned to certain categories or whether they should remain as in general undesignated reserve. But those are the blended funds that are already that we're in receipt of already, so the revenues are there.
These are the funds that were put in last year,
yeah.
so they're there to be expended.
So, and they're not being budgeted for spending in 2017, but we'd like to define where they fit in a sort of vision for different categories. Related to that, we're looking forward to supporting this fall to bring a spending article before the town meeting for an open space acquisition. Joyce Williams' property would be a great addition to the Newtown Hill Forest. And she's here tonight as well and has met with a few people around town and is interested in moving forward with talks about that property. She was at our meeting along with the members of the Conservation Commission and the Littleton Conservation Trust tonight. They had an application before us, but we decided to put it, everybody was in broad agreement to take that project and put it on the table for now because it would be very helpful to have different things, really important details laid out, like the size of the parcel, where to draw the line, if it gets subdivided, and then also, a number according to a market estimate of its value, so that we can really come to town meeting voters with that in hand. But it's important for us to sort of mention that now because it's the sort of forward-looking, it's a project that came to us in June, was brought to our attention then. It's on sort of the top 5 of the list of open space acquisitions that the town is looking to make, and is a great thing to put on the radar, so to speak, of both the board but also the public in general. So I know that there's other people in attendance tonight that may want to add to that. There's members of both the Conservation Commission and the Littleton Conservation Trust, as well as Ms. Williams.
Okay.
That's our budget, and thank you.
Appreciate it. Any comments on the CPC budget?
Mr. Chair, you had asked me to remind you about the recreation fencing for 300 King Street at
Oh, yes.
17,000 and change. I know that, I think Alicia had sent an email in looking to get on your agenda. I don't know if that happened or not, or if it just wasn't something that came up for.
We didn't, I'm not sure what you're
What are you
referring to right now.
The 300 King Street, the new basketball courts, for some fencing that was to be put up? No?
No, it wasn't on tonight's agenda.
No,
It
it
did
was,
send an application in, a filled out application for the fencing for 300 King. It was back in, I think it was February 28th. And I had sent it to Bonnie, yourself, a few other individuals as well.
yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay, where I didn't see it, I wasn't sure if it was something that was,
So is that something the CPC could take a look at maybe for fall town meeting? Possibly, or, and that was a scaled-down project?
Very much, yeah. It was for safety purposes to block fencing off from basketball courts in between the basketball courts themselves and the ravine sort of that goes off to the side as well into the parking lot. So there were two segments. Because the original concept was that the court, or the fencing would go all the way around the outside of the court. That was extremely costly, so we decided to cut that down just to have those specific spots used for safety purposes.
All right, so we'll take that under advisement and see what we can do
Okay.
moving forward for sure.
Thank you.
Members, you have any comments about that? I know, I drove by there this weekend and boy, there was a lot of folks using those courts. Whether or not they're all Littleton residents, I don't know, but there's a lot of courts, a lot of folks down there playing basketball. I know my son goes down there quite a bit too. Go ahead, Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, Don McIver, 43 Boston Street. Just want to add that for the Newtown Hill forest land annexation with Joyce Williams, it was tabled, but it's going to come back at the fall meeting, so you should be aware that that's what's going to come. And it's mostly so we can maximize our opportunities to get the $400,000 grant from the state, land grant.
And if I could, even before the November town meeting, it needs to come back onto the selectmen's radar screen to see, in order for us to take advantage of the opportunity of applying for a state grant under the so-called land program. That's a July 15th application deadline. $400,000 is the maximum grant award. The land grant program does not require that you have a town meeting vote to acquire the property before you submit the grant application. They do require it before you accept the grant application, the grant award though. So while and it was an important issue that, number one, I want to say to Joyce, to Ms. Williams for coming in. I appreciate it very much, having the town be approached by a property owner who was interested in having the town act to preserve their property and to give the town an opportunity to enter into negotiations to purchase the property. That doesn't always happen. And we very much appreciate it that it's happening in the case of your property. So thank you for that opportunity. And we had discussed things like the need to have an appraisal done, to have a plan that shows it's a 60-acre parcel, of which basically the back 40, which abuts town-owned property, would be made available for purchase. It has to be configured in a way that preserves value from an appraisal standpoint, so that the seller can achieve their goals as much as the buyer. And we had envisioned that there would be a need for a town meeting vote and or that is to negotiate the deal, to negotiate a purchase and sales agreement, get a town meeting vote, and then to submit a state grant application. What we're envisioning now is those three things would still occur with the board's blessing, but in a different order, that the town meeting vote would come last instead of coming in the middle. But the very next step would be to have further discussions with the seller and to come to terms on a P&S agreement, which is typically what we've done in cases where the town has sought to acquire property, so that we can lock in what the price is, that we have a configuration of where the land is, and put together the grant application. So those are the very next steps that we envision doing.
Fantastic. All right, so any other questions on the CPC budget? Thank you, Mint, and thank you for your committee for all your input and good work. So we're going to go back to the alumni field renovation. I'm going to start the discussion by saying, we did the track approximately 6 years ago. When we did the track, we had concept drawings. We had to pay for those concept drawings. It actually took alumni field into one of the concept drawings. When that process was all said and done, and we went through the design process, the town made the decision to just go with the track. So what we're gonna talk about tonight is the renovation design for Alumni Field. It's not anything but that. We're not making any determination of, we had a concept design that was presented to us on Monday, last Monday. Mr. Reardon did a fantastic job. When he presented to us, he said that I'm presenting based on being an engineer and based on what he felt was the best design for the property that was there. Now it's up to the town to decide whether or not, one, we want to move forward with the design and ultimately the bid to get a price to see what the actual renovation would cost, what it would look like, and what the actual whole project would be. There's been a lot of concerns about the infield and whether or not it's going to be artificial turf, grass. That's not what we're talking about tonight. Tonight, we're going to say, does the town, we're going to ask the town in May whether or not you want to move forward with a design for Alumni Field renovations. If in fact they say yes, Mr. DeCoste at the school committee meeting on Thursday said that he was willing to represent the board and then to vet this process through the town. So that we can make it to November and the town can make the decision as to whether or not any renovations get done. But for tonight, the $234,593 design funding, we're gonna ask in May for the town to make the decision. That's what we're talking about tonight. So I ask, if you have questions or you have concerns about the design and this funding, that's what we should be talking about tonight. Okay? Board members, any questions, concerns, and then I'll open it up to public comment. Mr. DeCoste?
No, I think you framed it quite well. I think that it's important to understand that there's been a lot that's been said, there's been a lot of concerns raised, there's been a lot of social media, there's been stuff written, I believe in the paper, saying that we are in fact going forward, and it's been decided that there's going to be an artificial turf surface. That has not been decided. It needs to be made clear that that has not been decided. And just like you said, we're moving forward to do a design and giving the residents the opportunity at town meeting to determine whether or not this makes sense. Mr. Reardon was tasked with essentially a feasibility. He was tasked with a problem that was identified years ago, as you mentioned, when the track was put forward. It's been a conversation that's taken place with Park and Rec, with the schools, with the Board of Selectmen, with all of the youth groups in town, and there's a need. And so Mr. Reardon addressed that need. He presented some beautiful boards and some great presentation. I guess the only regret I have is that when the boards were presented, some people made some assumptions that what was on the board is what always going to get. So thank you to Sean for putting forward all the work and all the effort in presenting us what he did. And he basically gave us the Cadillac, or the high-end option, all in, this is what we could have. And now it's up to us to determine what we should have. I did mention that I'd be more than happy to do forums. I've volunteered as a member of the Board of Selectmen to do that, to vet this process, to hear people's concerns relative to construction, material, whatever concerns people have, I'm more than happy to hear those out. I will engage with the school department, I'll engage with Park and Rec, and all of the youth programs, and from a maintenance standpoint, I'll also engage with Mr. Clyde and his team as well. So,
So I'm gonna just carry on what Chuck said. I think we should get some type of committee together, and maybe next, we can agenda this for next week, so we can set a committee, so we can have the public involvement in that committee, and the folks that, the stakeholders that Chuck just said, That way there we can get a diverse group of folks together to talk about this renovation and have the folks from town come to these meetings, be able to voice their concerns, change the design, say what's good about it, say what's bad about it, and, you know, look for a 6-month process and be able to have a real number and a real design to go and ask the town whether or not they want to do something. And again, this is only if this gets approved by everybody in town in May. Mr. Ravello.
Thank you. No, you said it very well, I think, both of you. Last week, we made it very clear that last week's vote was to accept services in kind, period, dot, end the report. We were not accepting a turf field. Tonight, we're not accepting a turf field. We're not asking for a turf field this evening. What we're asking for, and it seems that there is a consensus of sorts in town that Alumni Field does need some sort of renovation. The bleachers are in rough shape. The field is in horrible shape, maintaining it. Perhaps there's going to be annual costs as to however we go. Not perhaps, there will be annual costs regardless. And now here's where the perhaps comes in. Maybe we've been a little short on some of those annual costs in maintaining it over these past years. And there's an area where we can improve. But clearly, and I think you articulated it well, Mr. Chairman, is that this evening we're talking about design. Not the construction materials that will be used in the design, but how this might look. And then going down the road, town meeting, and we know what a year ago, folks chose not to purchase a turf field a year ago. You talked about the track. Folks made a decision not to put a turf field around or inside of the track where Alumni Field is right now. And instead the track went where the original one was. It was a complete redo there. So certainly, town has spoken twice about that sort of construction material, and we anticipate the town would speak again. So that's this is, it's teeing it up so the conversation can take place, not that a decision has been made. So I hope folks kind of take that. I've made personal assurances to folks who have communicated to me directly. The best I can say is, that's my assurance, and you can say, yeah, I can put that in the bank, or it's not worth a penny. It's going to be your all's decision. But certainly that's my position on this. And tonight, there is no decision to go on a turf field. It's to see about designing Alumni Field so it's usable for our kids and as a community event. If you go out there for Friday night football games during the season, it's a community event. You can meet and greet just about anybody in town when you go to those games. So it's more than just the kids, as important as they are. So thank you.
Selectman Hebert.
You three have summed it up perfectly.
Okay, Mr. Knox?
I think it's important to realize, when we say turf fields too, turf could actually mean a grass field, so a lot of people have that concept. The only point I wanted to make is that when we did the track, we realized it was a real problem. We had student athletes that couldn't participate, had to go out of town. When they practiced, they had to practice on inferior things. We have the same thing happening now with this, if it's done right, in my opinion, you can have soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, and football, all having their varsity games there, practicing there. So it could solve a lot of our field problems, too. I know people have said, is there a possibility of buying more fields? In this one way, if it can work, we're solving a lot of those problems right there, because everyone will be able to participate. And if you go to other towns right now, you'll see the fields being used all the time. Once again, I'm not talking about what's on the surface of the field. I'm just talking about the use that those fields get and how it's, some of the sports actually need it. Field hockey, almost all field hockey, when you go to tournaments now, is all played on synthetic, and we're playing on grass, and the thing bumps around all the time. And we know what the problem is with the lacrosse fields, with you pick up the ball sometimes, you're actually picking up rocks. So there is a need. So I'm fully in favor of making sure this gets on there so the town can decide what to do.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna open it up to the public. Just when I point to you, just stand up, tell me who you are and where you live. Yes, sir.
Fred Faulkner, I'm on the Finance Committee, 141 Harwood. Just a question, where did the 234,593 come from? It's an odd number. I'm just wondering where the heck it came from, and normally the design is about 10% of the project, so is this a $2.4 million project that you're expecting?
As far as the estimate, we saw a $3.6 million project done by Mr. Reardon. And as Mr. DeCoe said, that was the Cadillac, that was taking into everything. What we're presenting here is just the alumni field renovation. Not all the parking, not all the, will that have to be addressed? Absolutely. At some time, that will have to be addressed. So that's where the number comes from.
So this is
Go
10%
ahead.
of a 2.4?
10% of
Yeah,
Okay.
a stripped-down design that Mr. Rid
Okay,
came up
so
with,
it's-
by using
Yep.
his.
So it's 2+ million.
Somewhere right around there, yes,
Correct,
sir.
from a financial standpoint.
Correct.
Okay.
You can if you like.
Lisa Boone, Uplands Road. So my question is actually not directly related to this project. I think that there is no doubt in many people's minds, at least those who have children who've played sports in town, that we have a significant problem with all of our fields, that our fields are frequently overused and are not in good condition, and it's difficult to keep them in good condition. What I would like to know is, has there been a comprehensive plan figured out on what teams we have in town that include both school teams and park and rec teams? What is the amount of hours they need on a field? How many fields do we actually have in town? How frequently are those scheduled to be used? What is, I want to look at the big picture here, because I know Alumni Field, there's no doubt that it needs reconstruction, absolutely not. But the fields at the high school, which aren't that old, need reconstruction. We have other fields that we rely on for practice, for games. There's Corporate Field for soccer, which is primarily used. There's baseball and softball fields throughout town. So we know that these are shared by Park and Rec and school teams, and that it's a big job coordinating and making sure that everybody gets their field time and that the fields are not overused because of what happens to them. So what I'd like to know is, have we a plan? Do we know how many fields we actually want or need? Do we know how many teams we have and how we're going to service them? Because I think it's difficult to answer this one question about just Alumni Field. Again, I don't doubt that this needs to happen, but I think we need to have a broader picture so that we can manage all of our team usage better and maintaining those fields. And I don't think just coming up with an artificial surface because it can get more hours is going to be sufficient. I really do think it would make sense to find that data and to know what we really need to plan for now and the future.
Sure. And again, we're not talking about any type of field or the construction of whatever
But
the
because-
carpet,
because we-
so to speak, as you said the other day.
Right, but because we know that we have this problem with field usage.
So, if I may?
Yeah.
Park and Rec does have all the data on all the fields. The school department, DPW, and Park and Rec all have a memo of understanding as far as maintenance of fields. Maintenance is a big issue. The fact that we do have the numbers to determine how many fields, how many are needed based on enrollment in the youth programs, what varsity requires, and there are a number of fields in town that may have to be reused, may have to be, there may have to be something else done on them that has never been done on them before. So when
is there a
Mr.
way
Reardon,
for-
when Mr. Reardon looked at this whole feasibility, or this whole study, when he was tasked with the problem, he took a lot of that into consideration, looked at those numbers, and that is part of the equation moving forward.
And can the
hopefully
general
part of the
public
solution.
get that information? Can we have some sort of understanding of that big picture? Because it will make it a much easier, in my opinion, it'll make it easier for me and probably many other residents to really get a full understanding of what we're looking at here and why.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was gonna call on Alicia.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll tell you.
Did you want to go?
Well, I was just going to mention that, and it's even tomorrow night, there's a second public forum on the updating of the town's open space and recreation plan. It is both. We
comprehensive.
tended to use it just for the former and not the latter, but the consultant this time out is tasked with making sure that the open space and recreation plan fully describes and that's the recreation needs of the community, and as well as it has the open space needs. So I know our staff and boards are in contact with that consultant. Andrew's the chair of the committee, and that will be the place where we can make sure that all of that information is synthesized and available in a usable form for the public.
And is that an open meeting as well?
Yes,
So the
sure,
public
absolutely,
can certainly
absolutely.
go
Yeah,
tomorrow night
absolutely,
to hear that.
It's at the police station.
Go ahead, Alicia.
So,
And I was gonna say that too, so that's the perfect forum to have that conversation. It's at 7 PM tomorrow night at the police station, so now it's on TV, please come, because we want the feedback from the public for sure. And just in regards to the usage of the fields, we do have, especially spring, we sit down with the sports organizations because we have so much overlap usage. So just this past 2 weeks, we finally come up with a condensed plan for lacrosse, softball, baseball, and soccer as well. And there's multiple fields that are being multi-use, and there's fields that are abutted onto softball fields where you can't play softball and have soccer at the same time. So, we have to make sure and allot for that. So it's very complicated, so I don't want to waste, I know we've been here for a very long time. But it does change from season to season, from year to year, the amount of kids that, some years, some sports have higher numbers, some years they're lower, some seasons, again, higher and lower. It constantly changes, but I feel in general that constant need of use and the overlap is consistently there.
So again, I want to try and keep this focus into the article. It's a great question. Fortunately, we have just a forum for that tomorrow night at 7 at the police station, and I encourage you all to go. But again, we're going to talk about this warrant article for 234, 595. Yes. go ahead.
I'll put something together for you.
Thank
With, having been on the baseball board and everything, I don't have it in a deliverable for you right now, but that was
would be
all
great.
put
Thank
together
you.
for Sean, so I can put something deliverable.
Let's go over there. Go ahead, yes, go ahead, Alicia.
Okay,
Yes,
so
yes.
I just had one piece to add
Absolutely.
to all of this, is that I feel that I would be remiss if I didn't throw this in here. As we go into the design phase and we are talking about actually putting, finances down with this, I, just as someone that's going to take those keys over to a facility, most likely, at the end of it, I want to make sure that we're thinking about the project in, 10-year phase.
Absolutely.
So regardless of if it is turf or if it is grass, I think that is up to the town to make that decision. But we need to think about the plan that comes along with whatever choice is made.
As we did with the track, I mean, that was hand in hand, side by side, we were talking about the track, so absolutely, that will definitely be part of it. Yes, ma'am.
Katie Caruth, Goldsmith Street. I'm just wondering if you could share the exact wording for the article or post it so we can read it.
Well, the wording hasn't been developed quite yet as approved. Have you got it? You go ahead.
Can we call it up?
What does it say? Infill?
It's in a special town meeting. It would be the item D in Article 4 discussion.
Item D in Article 4. All right.
Yeah, I'll put it up on the screen.
Go ahead. So it says, alumni field renovation design 234-593 to be expended by the Permanent Municipal Building Committee for development, design documents, bid services, and renovations for alumni field, including installation of an infield turf system with permanent field markings, soccer, football, lacrosse, accessibility, home side, bleachers, capacity of 850 seats, concession, restroom, building, storage, team building, pedestrian traffic safety improvement.
I've lifted that description from Sean's report if
Okay.
you wanted to read differently.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna stick on this side, we'll come back up to you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Brett Bowler, Colburn Lane. I just want to say I think this is very premature. We're talking about a lot of money here, $250,000 up front, at least 10 times that to build it. As has been discussed here, we have a lot of capital needs in town. I personally think it's outrageous that we're even talking about an athletic field when we have a substandard, inadequate fire station to deal with, and a number of other projects moving up the list. Regarding the discussion of artificial versus other turf, you'll forgive my skepticism. In any discussion, in any article, I've never seen it proposed as anything other than an artificial turf field, which, as you pointed out, there are many, many concerns about. Myself and many others, the health impact, the environmental impact, and many other aspects of it. I'm not going to rehash that, I know you're aware of those concerns.
Right.
but I think that this is very soon to be putting something like this on the menu. Mr. DeCoste, I appreciate your desire to have forums. I think that we should be having those forums before we put $250,000 on the table.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Yes, ma'am. Hold on, Jerry. Sorry.
I agree that we need new fields, obviously. I was kind of confused, though, when you said that this is only about the design, and this is the Cadillac of the design. And not necessarily turf versus, artificial turf versus grass.
Yep.
The design, the wording says infill turf. So will there be an alternative design also presented to the town for artificial turf versus renovating the fields with grass? Or is this just one design that they will be presented with?
This is what we're gonna work towards through the next 6 months, is to figure out what that design is gonna be.
But this design there is for infill.
And to the alternative question, the way we've done it previously, in fact, the track was 4 options, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Track was
4 options.
4 options, and it went very smoothly.
Say that again,
It
please.
went very smoothly.
And that's what we're aiming to do too. I'm sorry.
That's it.
Yeah.
What you see up there is just something what the town administrator took to put something, I think it's as a placeholder, Keith, am I correct?
Well, we need to finalize this tonight.
Right, so that language will definitely be changed, Amy. And
So the design does have the Cadillac of maybe
No.
artificial turf versus the BMW of maybe grass? You know? And will there be a choice, or is it just?
We don't have a design yet. What we have is his concept, and we've got some numbers which will tell us what it will cost to prepare the field, and we've got the $3.5 million dream, and we've kind of dumbed it down, stripped it down to what it would cost to repair Alumni Field, repair the stands, and repair some of the services at Alumni Field. So the $2.5 million is an estimate, which is where we came up with the $234,000 that Fred asked about, that will allow us to, with lots of this kind of forum, lots of input, determine what it is that we do. And in doing that, that's going to enable other fields to be used differently and get rest and be maintained.
Go ahead, Jerry. I'll come right back to you.
Jared Elbury, New State Road. I'd like to echo the last speaker, and that is, one of the things with a design like this is, once the design money is spent, there's gonna be a tremendous push to go forward so the money isn't lost. Would the selectmen be willing to commit to part of this design process, including multiple options, including natural turf? I think one of the things people are concerned about, myself included, is the designers pick artificial turf, then we are presented 6 months.
Jerry, I'm gonna just get, and I just wanna focus back in.
Right.
That's why we're gonna have these sessions, so that when the design document goes out and the bid document goes out, we're gonna know exactly you want, yellow brick road coming down and going to X. So, you know, the options are gonna be there. As we did with the track, we will have options for the town to pick. I like option A, I like option B. That's what we're planning to do. Yes, sir.
Kevin Davis, Whitetail Way. So this evening, we also had an article item come about for the fire station, that we had a design consideration for about $530,000 for an entire fire station, and a track, which is going to be half of that, or a field, which is going to be half of that for design consideration. I kind of find that interesting, that an entire fire station is going to cost a little bit more, and we see a greater value in that versus, or may see a greater value in those dollars being spent versus the dollar for design being spent for that type of field. I'm not disagreeing that our town doesn't need new fields. I also think it's interesting that the article wording is, Keith, could you put that back up again real quick so I get it right?
Well, I'm told that I didn't get it right. What the article wording will be with the Board of Selectmen.
Well, I understand, but one of the interesting points on that, if you may put that back up, sir, for me, so I get it correct. one of the interesting points is that permanent field markings. You can't exactly have a permanent field marking on a non-synthetic field. It kind of grows up and it needs to be cut. So there's a,
Go ahead.
so there is a wording change at least that needs to be on there because permanent field markings would not be on a
Gotcha.
non-synthetic field.
Understood. Town council, what do you want to?
So just from my perspective, the article as drafted includes the ability to design a synthetic field, but it's not, that's not all that it, you can design a grass field under this article, or you can design a synthetic field under this article.
Does that answer your question?
No.
Okay.
If I can address the permanent markings on, when a field is built, there are permanent markers placed in the ground so that whoever's doing the striping of the fields can locate them. And they're underground, the monument's underground.
I understood.
So.
I understand that.
All right.
So one final.
Go ahead.
One final thing for design. So we're only talking about design and design considerations right now?
Design, yes, and the bidding of the design,
Okay.
yes.
Part of the design considerations I'd like to see put under this is a possibility for alternate infills. So in other words, a green infill which may be made out of cork and coconut fibers versus synthetic, which is made out of crushed and recycled tires.
I think you can bring that to the committees when that comes forward, absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
And also, one final thing about another design consideration would be typically these fields reach about a known field temperature of about 140 degrees, which was documented in several Sports Illustrated articles as melting people's shoes. A design consideration also ought to be a water cooling system, so that way.
Again,
things are there.
you're kind of going into the design phase. I understand what you're saying.
You asked for design considerations. sir.
No, I didn't. I asked to talk about the article that we're presenting to town meeting in May. You can have that opportunity,
Okay.
and we want to hear your design when we have the public forums.
Fair enough.
Go ahead.
The $235,000 is a reasonable question to be asking, because it is indeed a chunk of change. That doesn't mean that's what's going to be spent. I'm going to ask Bonnie just to talk about the Massachusetts bidding requirements and how when the planning board goes out and asks for a bid, that process and what we're looking for when it's all set.
There's two different ways that this would go out for bid. It's a request for qualifications, so what we would do is put together a specification that would define the designer qualifications. They would submit the qualifications by the deadline, they would be reviewed by the Permanent Municipal Building Committee, ranked, and then the committee would start negotiations with the most qualified firm. That's generally how they run their RFQ process. If they cannot meet agreement on a price, which may be less than this, then they start negotiating with the next firm. So if there's only $234,000 appropriated and the top-ranked firm is coming in at $250,000, they can't go any further. They start over with the next firm to try and get into a price that is more reasonable.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to go out back there. I'll come back to you.
Sorry, Amy
Yes.
Harlan was 3 Megaway, and I just had a question for Mr. Constant. So you talked about having a committee in some forums. Just because life moves fast and I don't always catch everything, how will I be notified? Will it be through the paper, or will you do like a survey maybe of residents in their electric bill? Like how can I access information and participate?
So if the committee's formed, we're most likely going to post it.
Okay.
So the same means that we post our meetings.
And for the vacancies and the makeup, come next week, because that's when it's going to be agenda to put the committee together. Okay? I saw one hand. Any other?
Right from the Finance Committee. Just want to reiterate what several people have mentioned here, so that everybody understands. We're looking at a bunch of projects coming up. Fire station, 6 or 7 million. Library, town portion of that's gonna be about 4 million, that's a couple of years out. Ladder truck, we're talking about another $1 million. These are all things that have been on our radar and we've been working towards it. All of a sudden, this comes up.
It's not all of a sudden, Alan.
Well,
It's not all of a sudden. Don't use that.
In terms of financial planning for the town,
It's not all of a
it's all of a sudden.
No.
Now, that doesn't mean that this doesn't need to be done.
Right.
I'm not arguing that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, remember We've got $7 million that we were talking about, and we wanted to reduce some of that down to give the taxpayers a break. Well, we've got $14 million worth of projects we're talking about doing. So let's give some ideas about what the priorities are here, okay?
Absolutely. And let's not forget, town meeting approves this, not the Board of Selectmen. Yes, ma'am, I saw your hand up.
Yes, Erica Putborny, Fox Lane. I just want to know what other designs are being looked at. I mean, this is one design that somebody brought to you, but how about, there has to be a lower cost way to do some of this, and then, for 2.5 million, you could hire someone who's, for many years, whose job is to take care of our natural grass surfaces. What other options are being looked at other than this design?
Okay, so what we saw was a concept design. What we need to move to is the actual design. We don't have the actual design. That was just a concept. That was in-kind services to the town of Littleton. During the track, we had to pay for that. So now we're gonna progress to the actual design, and that's what we're gonna be talking about. That's just a concept. That's all that is. So please participate and see, say what you'd like to see in the design.
May I have one thing?
Go ahead.
The requirements are going to drive that. So the requirement may be simply fields and stop there. The requirement may be alumni stadium, to take it to an absurdum. Some of the things that Sean did show us on there were like snack bar. We also talked about pardon the word, hanging around with the grandchildren too much. Restrooms, thanks very much. Pumping stations. Comes with age and grandchildren. But to be serious, so what we define as a requirement for the town also, and what we'd like to see out there plays into it. We talk about certainly home bleachers. We talked about away bleachers, in other words, the visiting team. Do we not have visiting team bleachers? Do we not have the restrooms? Do we not have the snack bar? All those things contribute to what it is that it's going to be. Do we not put a fence up? Parking. Do we not do anything with the parking lot? So, because you may recall, and some of that was doing a little bit of rerouting of some of the traffic and changing the parking somewhat. So this design number is not sacrosanct. It offers an upper limit, as Bonnie mentioned. If something comes in at 250 for design, it's not even considered. But when we do the requirement, in fact, if we scale down that requirement considerably from what we saw on the board, irrespective of what the field is actually composed of, that number comes down. The design figure doesn't stay here.
But I don't think, so back to Kevin's point, if you are considering all the options, and then this number might not cover it, because if you do end up going ahead with a synthetic surface, having something like cork underneath could be more expensive. Having a cooling system underneath could be more expensive. So does this design take into
We haven't
account any of that?
decided that yet. We haven't decided that yet. I mean, that's why we want the town to tell us, yes, move forward, or no, don't move forward.
But your point is valid,
Yeah,
because that
it
gets
is,
back into
it
the
is.
requirements. And what do we lay down as the requirements?
We're just not there yet.
It becomes a litany, and now that has to be addressed in the design phase, and then certainly if the design included those particular requirements, because those were the ones we wanted to fill, and now it becomes a cost to actually to execute that program, if you will. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, sir, I'll come back to you.
Hi, Byron Rupp, I live on Newstead Road. I attended the town meeting last year where this was a hot topic, and there's a lot of folks talking about a feasibility study. Feasibility study which would answer questions that I'm hearing now all around the room, even from Parks and Recs about life cycle operations and maintenance costs, the economics of a project such as a turf field or whatever type of thing, the environmental risks, the health concerns, a chance to get all these out in the open, a feasibility study. Is there any chance that this current scope of work could be reworded to capture some of those holistic concerns from the community?
We can vet that through the process. I mean, if a majority of the folks say we want to get that part of the design phase to have that
I heard a lot of
information.
folks at town meeting last summer saying that exact thing. let's take a hardcore, holistic, comprehensive look at all the issues, all the problems and opportunities, the costs, the pros and cons, the trade-offs.
Yeah,
That's a feasibility study, not a design
Right.
for infield turf system.
Okay,
That's what the warrant says.
gotcha. Go ahead, Darrell.
Darrell Baker, Grist Mill, on the school committee, but not speaking on behalf of the school committee. So I was just wondering, in terms of the draft article that you're going to word a little bit there, I think there's a lot of concern, as I'm hearing it, from an implied preference towards artificial turf in it, in the way people are interpreting the way it's worded. And perhaps we just look at the wording to make it clear that we're looking at renovation of Alumni Field to include bleachers, playing surface, parking, just the facts of what we're considering there. And I think that will at least take the concern from what I'm hearing of people implying that it's an artificial turf thing, and that we can leave it much more clear that it's during the process that we'll be determining the specific type of field.
We can do that. Get some of those comments on there, Mr. Berg?
Working on it as we speak.
There he goes, town council.
Thank you.
Saw a handout back there?
Yes, Mike Lynn, I'm speaking on behalf of my position, which is athletic director for Little Public Schools for the last 11 years. You hear a lot of talk about people saying we need more time, we need more time. From my perspective, this should have been addressed 10 years ago. Okay, we're behind on our fields. Our kids in the sports of field hockey, boys lacrosse, girls lacrosse, and football are playing on fields that are many times an embarrassment to me as an athletic director. The fields are not suitable for varsity play. All the fields that we use, as soon as we're done, the youth kids are coming on to them. We don't have enough green space as far as fields. There's been a lot of talk at school committee and on social media about everybody's already assuming that there's something going on about synthetic turf. Sean gave a conceptual design. It was his vision. It may not necessarily be the town's vision. And the town is objectively looking at the facility of Alumni Stadium, Alumni Field, with surrounding improvements. So people have to understand that as Sean presented it, it involved additional parking in Russell Street, better routes of egress, and it addressed many issues, not just the field. So the cost of it is going to benefit some of the schools around there too. So there's a lot of things that are being looked at, and people are being honest and transparent when they're saying, we don't know what the field surface is going to be. There's a lot going on at the federal level, but people should also know that a lot of things that are going on social media right now with synthetic turf is very anecdotal and subjective, and there's never been a government agency that I have seen that has said synthetic turf is dangerous. We have a document from Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and we have another document from Connecticut Department of Public Health that both say they do not, based on the research and data right now, do not see a significant health risk.
Wait a minute.
But we know the
You
federal level.
shut down anyone who said anything negative about turf, but he can stand there and say it's fine?
Go ahead, Mike,
I didn't
just
say it's
wrap it
fine.
up.
I'm saying we have documents from Massachusetts and Connecticut that do not see significant health risk.
We're gonna talk about the article now, Michael.
But
Go ahead, wrap it up.
Okay. But there is the debate going on nationally now, and we're all watching that.
Yes.
I'm saying what's available right now does not say that. There are people stating that. But what's going on nationally, we all have to look at that, and it's going to factor into what happens here. So right now, though, that surface that's in the middle of that facility is a question mark. So I think if everybody just listened to the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, they're being honest right now, and that is the truth.
All right. So, thank you, all right. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just feel like, are you pointing to me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I feel like I have to address anything that Mike
Just state your
said.
name and address, please.
What?
State your name and
Oh,
address.
Linda Stein, New State Road. In February of this year, the EPA came out with a report being fairly definitive about the health risks of turf fields and that more studies need to be done. Also, the CDC and ATSDR, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, those are federal agencies, came out with a similar report saying that studies need to be done, but based on the information, they do not recommend turf fields.
Okay, thank you. right, I'm gonna wrap this up. I got two more, and two people that haven't spoke. Go ahead. You, sir.
One thing that I feel is it seems to be premature from the standpoint of if we're only riding a tricycle, why we're asking to upgrade one field to a Ducati. I mean, we should fix all the fields. For $2.5 million, you can fix all the fields, couldn't you?
Please, there's an open recreation meeting tomorrow, open space and recreation. That's something that they're gonna talk about, what the condition of the fields are, so.
But if you spend $234,000 and then decide not to do anything, do you lose that money?
No.
Yes.
We always have the design. We don't lose it. All right, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Sarah Rambacher, Hartwell Avenue. I've heard several people mention the big picture, and I want to reiterate that nobody's even mentioned maintenance. We need to think of that when we're thinking of the project, because it could be significantly different from any maintenance that we're doing now. And we need to think of the whole picture of what equipment is needed, because that may have to be bought. There may be more or less water demands. That all needs to be thought through and included when evaluating a design. So that information needs to be included in what design.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That
And
was brought up earlier.
we did mention a little bit about the maintenance piece, but yes, I agree.
And I'd also encourage you when rewriting that, to think of you need to word it as, these are our requirements.
No.
You don't come up with a solution for someone to design. You come up with the requirements that you need. I'm a user experience person, so that's what we do. You don't ask the users what they want. You ask what is needed, and you look at the big picture, and then you find the solution. You don't come in with a solution.
Thank you.
So when you reword that.
We're gonna read it to you now. You got it? Yeah, go ahead.
To the concern about $2.5 million, I'd offer us to think about this, please. It goes back to the track, and now I've got to try and remember some of the numbers, but I'm going to be ballpark. It was the $2.7 million so solution that included everything around Alumni Field, and the town settled on a $670,000 solution. And those numbers are somewhat accurate. I'm sure I'm off some pennies one direction or another. So that's how we went through this whole vetting process. But it began with somebody coming forward and saying, we'd like to see a new track, and the discussion ensued. We've actually had this particular discussion, we'd like to see a new field take shape. But then as we go through that process, what is it all we want to do? And just to reiterate, we talk about requirements, and Sarah, you hit the point on the head when you say that, because in essence, that's what it is. Define the requirements, and in conjunction with the school committee, the rec department, and others perhaps, that the PMBC, when they put together that document to go out for bid, will be precisely that way. And maybe if we can make available the what we do with the track, so at least you know what the process we've done in the past and successfully instituted to pretty much, certainly not everybody was satisfied, but the vast majority of folks were satisfied on how we approached the track. I think it forms a good model for us. And if maybe that's something we could dig up, resurrect and put back on the website, and probably it's still on the website someplace, but draw people's attention to that. Would that be helpful?
Sure, if we can find it, yeah. Okay, Chuck, you got it?
I do have it. You want to catch Mr. Burrell now?
Jim, what was
I
the
said
cost?
two more, so.
Tom Perrell, 7 Cottle Lane. What was the cost of the design of the track? I'm sorry, you may
Next time, I
have.
don't remember off the top of my cranium now.
Yeah.
Just the broad numbers is all I can recall.
I think it was, Mike, maybe you can catch this. I thought it was about 90.
Yeah, I don't remember it. I think it would be worthwhile to get that number, but I would like to reiterate the point that it was an encompassing effort with many facets and many choices that were presented to the town. And ultimately, we decided on probably on a tiered level. We took the lowest tier, but we fully vetted and evaluated all the other tiers before. Not simply in terms of cost, but impact, benefit, how many kids were going to be, would benefit from it. And it was a very, vetted process that went through that we ultimately made it. And as you said, PJ, we did not satisfy everyone. There were many people who walked away saying, I'm not happy that we did it, I'm not happy that we did that and we didn't do this, and I'm not happy that we did, you know what I mean? So I think it would be very worthwhile to figure out exactly how much it cost, because it was a terrific product and a terrific process, and ultimately allowed us to understand not only why we did what we did, but why we didn't do what we chose not to do. It was there in black and white, and we knew ultimately why we didn't say. When I say we, I'm talking about town meeting.
It took us 2 years.
And the ballot, that one actually went to a ballot.
Did it go 2 years?
Yeah.
All right, so, any other questions? Go ahead, Chuck.
All right, this is the rewritten language. Alumni Field renovation design, $234,593 to be expended by the Permanent Municipal Building Committee for the development of design documents and bid services for renovations to Alumni Field. Said development and design documents may include a grass field, an infield turf system with permanent field markings for soccer, football, and lacrosse, and field hockey. Have to add that as well.
Don't make a list. Don't make a list.
Accessible home side bleachers with a capacity of 850 seats, concession/restroom building, storage/team building, and/or pedestrian and traffic safety improvements.
Good, Betsy, what?
I would just say, to
Less
Sarah's
is more.
point, and to the feasibility, if instead of listing it, because again, you're designing it already, it's Alumni Field, and these are the specific things, instead of saying, these are our needs, we need we need more field accessibility, we need more time and all those other things, and put the needs down rather than the deliverables already.
Yeah,
I think that's what's
your cart horse.
getting, yeah.
So it does say may include, so maybe if we just added may include and then to be confirmed via.
No.
I think what we're looking for is, we have these number
Can I
of
just point
teams
process?
that
I
need
believe
these
this is the
places to play.
selectmen's opportunity to
Yes.
form a motion, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to speak to it once they decide what they want to
And
do.
then again, this
But
could
we're
be.
gonna devolve a little bit into chaos if we all just start
Yeah,
shouting out
yeah.
what our
I'm with that.
preferences are.
Go ahead,
So,
town
I
council.
mean, if you'd like, you can say Alumni Field renovation, $234,593 to be expended by PMBC for the development of design documents and bid services for renovations to Alumni Field. Spot.
Done.
And then your motion will be
Yep,
what the design includes.
okay. For this, for this meeting?
Right, well, this is going on this warrant.
Right.
Right, but the motion's not until, we'll
May.
work on the motions, but ultimately at town meeting time, we'll have our motions to make, and this warrant
Okay.
article would be broad enough to do a whole number of things.
Okay,
Can I just, and this is really just so we all
this is
understand.
it. This is it.
One thing, this is it,
Oh.
okay. Just by doing that, we're saying this is specifically Alumni Field. It's not solving the field
Yes.
problem for the town. So we just, if that's what it is, and then we just need to be
Gotcha.
clear on that.
Thank you.
Because I think that's part of the confusion.
All right, I'd look for a motion.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
The third one on the CBC, or community preservation, sorry. Do I just read it exactly like it is, or do I have to say the amount in the article?
You could add the amount of,
$315,223. All right. Okay. Move the Board of Selectmen vote to insert the following articles onto the warrant for the May 2nd, 2016 annual special town meeting, subject to approval as to form by town council. First one, add Alumni Field renovation design, $234,593.
Can we have quiet, please? Thank you.
To special town meeting for FY 2016 capital improvement plan adjustments. Second one, move trust fund grants from annual to special town meeting for the LHS Innovation Center, $75,000, and DEHS Animal Care Assistance Program, $4,000. And third, insert FY 2017 community preservation budget for projects totaling $315,323 in annual town meeting, Article 8.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Look for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
No.
Yeah, we miss it.
You should be able to thank you all for coming.
you should be able to make that 7:30 library meeting.
Yeah, really. I feel bad. Apologies to the library committee. Alright. Move the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to national law to go into.
Hey, folks, we gotta go into executive session, so please, comments and conversations outside. Thank you.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A, Clause 6, to go into executive session to consider the value of real property, since an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the board's negotiating position relative to the Cooper Farm property at 180 Great Road, and not to convene an open session thereafter.
So moved and second. Mr. Knox? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Ravello? Mrs. DeShon's aye. We are now in executive session. Please vacate the building.
Approve at least.